You guys need to have it pulled up on your phone so you can respond to comments and stuff.
I got you.
Oh, I can't get Discord on this outdated thing.
Okay, you need to have the
On the
YouTube
tablet.
chat pulled up.
I can't.
What's
and be in
up,
the
guys?
Discord at the same
Curtsy28
time.
and the crew here, and right now we're about how far away are we? 12 minutes away before polls close in Nevada for both the Republican primary and the Democratic primary. So we're going to be covering the results as they come in, analyzing them for you guys, giving our take, and then just having a good time chatting with you guys. So that's going to be our night tonight. So the Republican primary and the Democratic primary. The Republican primary is non-binding. There's no delegates. Nikki Haley is really the only one on the ballot, but there is this other option that people can vote for. It's called none of these candidates, as well as Mike Pence and Tim Scott. They're still on the ballot from before they dropped out, so they could probably get a couple of votes. But the main contest will be between Haley and none of these candidates. So we're really watching to see if enough MAGA guys will show up and vote against Haley. So we want her to lose that. And then also on the Democratic side, there's also an option for none of these candidates, but Biden will be facing off against Williamson. Dean Phillips was not on the ballot for Nevada. Nevada in the past has voted for progressives. I think it voted for Bernie twice. So it could be an interesting race there, but I'm expecting Biden to win. So we are now about 10 minutes out before polls officially close. And I guess we're going to just wait here for some results. I've got a few networks pulled up here. We got MSNBC, Washington Post, and CNN. I like MSNBC is the best. They have you can go over the individual counties, and it's got everything here. The New York Times is being stupid, and it's trying to make me pay to see their election coverage, which I'm not going to do because I don't support the New York Times. And I don't think I should have to pay for that. So we're not going to do that. And if the mainstream networks are covering this, we're going to check in and see what they have to say. So, guys, what do you guys think so far about this whole thing, this whole process?
Well, I mean, for me, the Republican primary, like you said, it would be absolutely devastating to Nikki Haley's campaign if when she's loses to none of these candidates on the primary that she thinks she has in the bag. It would be absolutely destructive to any of her hopes and dreams. I personally hope it happens because I think it would be the most funniest thing I've ever seen. And as for the Democrat side of things, as unfortunate as it is, they're still going to vote for Biden, even though, people are coming out here criticizing him. Biden's having the lowest approval rating out of between him and Donald Trump, but people are still going to vote for him. I don't know. In my brain, that doesn't make sense, but in their brain, it makes sense. I'm not even going to try to understand it, but I'm predicting Biden will more than likely get probably 95% of the vote. Marianne more than likely get about 3% or less, and other candidates would get the remaining percentages. But we got to see the results.
Okay, great. Crickets. That's a great way to start the stream.
I was waiting for our other
Okay.
co-host to give his take on things.
Dad, you know
I
full
have
well
to
he's
vote
got nothing to
Dad.
say. Absolutely zero.
Excuse me.
You come on.
For what?
You know better not to even go there. Like, you really think he has anything productive, Dad?
I was just hoping he would, learn over time, but I guess I'm the fool here. But I mean, I gave my final percentage thoughts. What would you think the overall end result's going to be, percentage like breakdown wise?
Well, I did my prediction videos yesterday, and I had Haley winning with 95% of the vote. I had Biden winning with about 97% of the vote. But all throughout today, I was reading a bunch of stuff on this none of these candidates option, and I'm starting to think that it may get more support than I originally thought. So that's what I'm really going to be looking for tonight. I think Biden winning is a foregone conclusion. I guess the margin of his victory will be interesting. But the real interesting race will be between Nikki and none. I guess we'll just say none. And I guess it'll be interesting to see if Tim Scott or Mike Pence can get any votes.
I mean, Tim Scott and Mike Pence might get a handful of votes, but I'm like I said, I'm hoping the none option beats out Nikki Haley because that's just like the final nail in the coffin. Like you're finished. No one's gonna vote for you in the main election. So, I mean, if I were her, I would have dropped out a long time ago. But I guess she's so determined and thinking she's gonna beat out Donald Trump. It's not happening.
I actually prefer this. Like everybody that I talk to says that they just wanted to drop out. Let her keep going. Like this isn't hurting anything. And if anything, this is better for us because after this whole thing's over with, we can turn and laugh at her and say, haha, look, you got your butt kicked. You lost here, you lost there, you lost there. If she dropped out like after New Hampshire, then we couldn't really say that because she didn't go on to lose more contests if she had dropped out then. But, and she could have made the argument, well, if I had stayed in, maybe I could have won and maybe this and maybe that. Nope, there will be no maybe anything if she goes on to lose everything. It'll be a foregone conclusion that she sucks. And I think the longer she stays in and the more losses she rakes in, the less chance she has to run in 2028. I mean, I think that ship's already sailed. She's made a complete fool out of herself this whole primary season. She's turned the core Republican base against her. I wouldn't even be surprised if she changed her party registration and just became a Democrat. Nikki Haley has no morals, no values. She stands for nothing. All she wants is she wants power and she wants to win elected office. And she'll do anything that it takes to get that. If she comes to the conclusion one day that the only way for her to win elected office again in this country is through Democrats and left-wingers, there's no doubt in my mind she'll change her party registration. She doesn't care about Republican values. She doesn't care about this party. It's all about herself and making money. It's sick.
True, dude. True.
You know what? You're right. If Nikki Haley dropped out a long time ago, we couldn't keep clowning her. And, every time she gets interviewed, she's always running her mouth, and she always says something so brain dead and stupid. It's laughable and funny. Like, the other day I saw Nikki Haley saying, it's either going to be me or Kamala Harris as the first female president. Like,
she's becoming the new Kamala Harris.
She is at this point. You're right. But even
True,
so, like,
man.
if you're a Republican, why would you ever compare yourself to Kamala Harris? So, I could honestly see her flipping completely and becoming a Democrat in 2028, running on that side of things. Because, like you said, every Republican hates Nikki Haley. The hardcore Republican despises her. I do, personally. I just like seeing her make a fool of herself, and it pretty much erodes everyone's confidence in her that she is very clueless, has no idea what she's doing, and is just out to, further her own profits and not actually care about anyone but herself.
Yeah, she's got a seat on the company of Boeing,
Oh yeah, that's the only reason she wants to continue the foreign wars and keep sending money overseas. Oh man.
Yeah, and we are now just 4 minutes away from the polls closing in Nevada. So it looks like they're estimating 75,000 votes on the Republican side. Let's take a look. They're estimating 120,000 on the Democratic side, so that's interesting. Could that be a good sign for Biden? I don't know. We'll see. Maybe it's because nobody cares about the Republican side since there's no delegates. But then again, you would think more people would care about an open party or primary versus an incumbent primary, because incumbent primaries are usually foregone conclusions. So that's interesting. Now, Dad, if we take a look back in 2016, Trump actually won here. He won the Nevada caucus in 2016 with 46% of the vote. Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio were in the top three with him. But New Hampshire and Nevada back in 2016, that's really where Trump got his whole beginning of his political career. Because if you remember, he lost Iowa to Ted Cruz, and then New Hampshire and Nevada gave Trump the momentum to go on to actually win the rest of the primary. So Nevada's been historically good for Trump. He didn't win it in the general elections, but he came real close. I believe he's going to win it this time around in the general. And of all the 4 early states, Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada, Trump has had the biggest lead in the polling in Nevada. So this is Trump country, and I'm hoping Nikki Haley goes down in flames.
Same here.
Great
I mean,
analysis.
without a doubt. And if Rick, without a doubt, and if Rick Harrison is out, campaigning, because if you're not aware, everyone watching the stream's unaware, his son, I want to say probably a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, overdosed on fentanyl, and he blamed the border crisis, which, it's without a doubt, it is the border crisis' fault. And if Rick Harrison is out and about getting people out, saying, hey, vote for Donald Trump, he cares about this country, he's going to save us. Rick Harrison's got a lot of sway, especially in the state of Nevada. He's probably the most famous person from Nevada that I know lives in that state. So, I have a feeling Rick Harrison will deliver the state of Nevada to Donald Trump on a silver platter.
Well, yeah, because it was, I think, 2 points in 2016, and then 2020, Nevada was one of the few states that actually voted more Republican than it did in 2016. A lot of states in 2020 shifted to the left, which is why Biden won. But Nevada was an outlier, which means it's trending to the right. It's becoming more Republican. They just elected a Republican governor in this past midterm, the 2022 midterm. So I'm more optimistic about this state than I've ever been, and I really do. I truly believe that Trump is going to carry the state in the general election.
Well, I mean, if we look at what's happening in California, the state that's right next to Nevada, I guarantee you all of the Republicans that live in California are getting so fed up with the state's blue left-wing sicko ideologies that they're moving to closer states surrounding California that used to be blue. And these Republicans that are leaving California, where their vote doesn't count and matter at all, they're moving to these other states to convert them to the Republican side. And, I can see Nevada remaining a red state for a long time to come. And, that's great. That just means we're not going to have any more whack job leftists in the office, which I'm completely okay with.
Same here.
Caden, why don't you say something more than just, yeah, I agree, same. It's not funny.
Sucker Dad, it ain't funny. What's wrong with you, man?
Okay, we're 10 seconds to go before we get some results in here.
That's all I just have to say is I agree. I mean,
All
I
right,
agree with
so
your
the
opinion.
polls have closed.
I think they're going to call it for Biden. Are they going to call it as fast as they did last time?
On Saturday with South Carolina, they called it for Biden with 5% of the vote in. So, but then again, South Carolina was that was supposed to be like a better state for him. So maybe we could see Nevada be called at 10 or 15%, maybe. I don't know. We will see. Do you see? And then here you guys go on Thursday, February 8th, we have the caucus between Trump and Binkley. That'll be interesting to watch. All right. So the polls have closed, and we have too early to call on both sides. So that's interesting. Let's see if there's any vote anywhere. I don't see anything. Let's see if the New York Times will let me use their site.
So you didn't support them.
I don't, but I use their election coverage when it works. But nope, they want to try to make me pay for it. Which I'm not going to do.
They're a bunch of greedy pigs who deserve to be shut down.
It doesn't seem like the mainstream sites are covering this.
Really? I wonder why they're not covering it.
Oh, because they're too lazy.
Well, normally anything politics related, every single
All right, so Fox actually
media outlet
does
jumps
have
on
the
it.
ticker up. So hold on, bear with me while I set it up. I like having the ticker at the bottom.
Oh, excuse me. Oh, ouch. It's unfortunate that guy we reached out to didn't respond and come join us for the show.
Screw him.
Disappointing.
Okay, Dad,
Yeah,
you
I
guys
know.
have the results pulled up on your end, right? Like, so you're not just sitting here like a bump on a log. Like, you actually have something to commentate on.
A stranger now. I
Mhm.
can pull up MSNBC or something.
Yeah, you need to be watching the
Or you know
results.
what? Let me see if the New York Times will let me in without charging me.
Probably won't because they want to charge you.
Oh, better not. Trying to make me pay for your site? I don't think so.
I don't think they are. They don't deserve money.
They don't deserve my money. They're already rich off Wall Street.
Bunch of pigs.
All right, let's see. Oh,
All right, Neocon, I see you're in the chat. Well, so far we have no results in, but you should definitely join the Discord. We would appreciate your commentary.
the door is open. Well, I'm on the New York Times right now, and oh, here it is. Yep, now they're trying to make me pay for it.
Just pull up MSNBC
Nope.
and MSNBC. They have it pulled for free.
That's unbelievable. Oh, if you want to see this, you have to sign up for the New York Times. Well, I don't want to.
Yeah.
At MSNBC. MSNBC.
NBC.
Man. Come on, where's that? What is this?
What's
When I
funny right
looked
now?
up MSNBC Nevada primary, people also ask, is Nikki Haley Republican?
Probably not. She probably secretly a Democrat.
The Rhino for sure.
Yeah.
Come on, I just want to pull up MSNBC 2024. Ah, here we go. All right, I'm on MSNBC. Finally. Ugh.
Yeah, will you respond to Neo in the chat and tell him to join the Discord?
Can you not hear us? I'm pretty sure we told him outright.
What?
Yeah, I'll go there. Like, can you not hear us?
I guess not.
I'll go to the chat. I'll be back.
Dylan, how much do you want Trump to win on a scale of 1 to 10?
10. What a dumb question.
More like an easy question because I want him to win by 100. I love Trump. I didn't know Vivek dropped out.
Caden, just stop.
Alright, I'm sorry.
Dad, are you there? Dad, you there?
Hello, you here?
All right, I'm back.
Where are you?
If you go look at the live chat, you can see what I was doing.
Oh, alright.
Unless you're not gonna do that.
I already looked. I saw your little comment on the live stream.
We should be getting some results any second now. It's been 10 minutes.
Has
We'll be
it
getting
been
something.
10 minutes? Wow.
We should be getting something within the next 2.
So, Dad, between the race
All
between
right.
Scott and Pence, who do you think will get more votes?
Tim Scott. I
think
think
so?
Tim Scott will be. Yeah.
Yeah, you're probably right.
I mean, Mike Pence dropped out super early.
Yeah,
And then
he saw the writing
Tim
on the
Scott
wall.
dropped out a little bit. Oh, yeah. I mean, he outed himself as being a warmonger, so that pretty much put a nail in his coffin.
Well, Andy
Not to
betrayed
mention
Trump.
what he did on January
There's
6th.
that too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, so he was finished. There was no point in him even trying to run.
True, dude, true.
No, that was worth in him running, but he just never got enough momentum going. I say that because I supported him in the beginning, and before I switched over to Nikki Haley. But yeah, the problem is that he just never got the momentum going. He was hated by a lot of the Trump people, and he really just didn't get enough. Yeah, there were too many people in the pool already that just eventually sank his chance.
Yeah, and he just like I don't know. You might have made the argument that he was a good vice president, but he's so low energy. He doesn't grab people's attention. And then there's the fact that he let all of us down on January 6th.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, in my opinion, I don't really like Mike Pence as a person. Like, he might have been a good VP, but I didn't like him as a person.
Well, I liked
my-
him before.
Why would you not like him as a person? He's a very good Christian guy, very personable man
He
of
just seems
God.
like a negative, like almost a loser.
No,
Like,
It's not
especially
at
when he
all.
was.
no, he was a good guy before January 6th because he stood up for conservative values. He's pro-life. He's a strong Christian. He's patriotic. But then he had that just terrible moment, and that just ruined all of his years of hard work for the country, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, what was he really supposed to do on January 6th? Like what like there was nothing that he really could do except count the votes. I mean, there already were objections about Pennsylvania and Arizona, but once but after the point, became a point where what actually could Mike Pence do? There wasn't really anything.
Well, so see, that's where you're wrong. If he had actually, so the reason why the plan didn't work is because he didn't go along with it. If he had gone along with the plan and had rejected the electoral votes from Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Georgia, Arizona, New Mexico, those were the states they were contesting. They they would have been sent back to the state legislatures to recertify. Then they would have had at least 24 hours of televised congressional hearings on the matter. Then what would happen is they had alternate slates of electors ready to go. Those electors would have been certified instead of the Biden electors. And then, of course, there would have been legal challenges that followed. That at that point, it would have went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court would have invoked the political question doctrine, said this isn't for the courts to decide. And then if there's any dispute within the Electoral College or the presidential election, it goes to the House. And at that point in 2020, there was more state delegations for Trump than there were for Biden. So they would have voted for Trump, thus re-electing Trump to another 4 years. I mean, it was a genius plan.
Would that even been legal though? Like, this is my first time hearing about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the Supreme Court has the power to invoke the political questions doctrine. And if there's any kind of dispute whatsoever, like if somebody doesn't get to 270 in the Electoral College, the Constitution permits the House of Representatives to decide who the president is. Like, that's in the Constitution. And state legislatures have the power to decide who their electors are. That's also legal. So there was more that Mike Pence could have done, but he was more worried about appeasing the left, and he just didn't want to stand up for what was right.
Mm-hmm.
I would disagree with that. I would say that with former Vice President Mike Pence, because this is the first time hearing your perspective on what might have been done or could have been feasible. I think in that context moment, with everything going on, especially with the advice he'd been given, I don't see how there was really much other options for him. I mean, besides hearing the objections from Arizona and Pennsylvania, which had both a representative and a senator's signature to it, which could be then heard. I don't see how the others would have gone through if for example, like, did any Republican representatives or senators object to any of the other states you mentioned?
So the states that were in question were Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico.
Okay, but like I'm at. But was there a an objection, official objection raised with a representative member of the House of Representatives and senator's signature? Because I know, for example, Representative what was it, Paul Gosar? And I should know this because he's from AZ. Um, and Senator Ted Cruz had an objection for Arizona's electoral votes, I believe. I'm not sure though if there was any objections made on the other states you mentioned,
I
because I know
believe,
there were
yeah,
questions.
I believe they had a signature for Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, but they had signatures for the other swing states, but they got withdrawn after the rioting happened.
Okay, I because I just I have okay, because I'm just curious about what states their actual were an official objection for.
I believe those three states
So
that we just listed were the three that there
yeah,
was actual objections on the House floor.
okay, so that Arizona and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. Okay, so um, the reality, I think with Arizona and Pennsylvania, uh, there certainly were questions to be asked, and again, it's the, but I just I don't see how there was much Mike Pence could do beyond simply hearing the objections and allowing them to be raised and debated on. I think the problem with the blame Mike Pence crowd is that I don't see really what else he could have been done. There's a lot of talk of what he should have done, but the reality is that what could he have done? And I think that the thing about Mike Pence is you cannot question his integrity and his honesty. He's not a duplicitous person. In with
Well,
Mike former vice so with former President Mike Pence, he was put in a position where essentially he did what he had to do, not necessarily what he wanted. There's there is a difference.
well, I mean, you talk about integrity. Is there a lot of integrity in handing the keys to the asylum over to the inmates?
It's not ideal, obviously. I mean, giving let it counting the votes, which decided President Biden as the victor, is a sucky thing to do, but there is a huge risk when it comes to not transitioning over to the next administration simply because you don't want to. And I think in the case of former President Mike Pence, he was put in a position where, after the objections for Arizona, Pennsylvania, etc., had been heard, that at that point, once they'd been heard and not gone through or whatever, and the votes went for Biden, at that point, I really don't think that Mike Pence really felt that there was anything else that he could do beyond simply count the votes. It's one we can. It sucks that Biden won, but it's something that I think that he understood he had to accept, rather than risk the ramifications of what could come if he didn't.
All right. We can agree to disagree, and honestly, this is something that happened 4 years ago. This is in the past now, so I would rather spend our time talking about on the current matter, this election, this primary. So it's been a while since we last spoke. So I guess I'm interested to see, and Dad, I want you to weigh in on this as well when he's done. But I guess I want to hear where you're at right now with the whole primary process. Do you think this thing's wrapped up? Do you think Trump's got it in the bag? If not, where do you see Nikki Haley's path to victory? Do you think this win here in Nevada, this quote unquote win, will set her up with any momentum going into her home state of South Carolina? And I guess just any further outlooks beyond that. I'm curious to hear what you got.
Well, I certainly hope and want Nikki Haley to win. I really think that it's important for her to win, but I think I think her path to victory is to really get going and galvanize, because she at least got some, got some support in, she's at least got something. She doesn't have nothing. It's not been a complete blowout for her like in New Hampshire. Like, she actually got some support there, and in, the Iowa caucuses, I mean, yes, Trump led the field, but at least she got some support. So there is an opportunity for her to take advantage of. The thing about the campaign is that they really need to go into overdrive, and they have to do it now and everywhere. I think that Nikki Haley, obviously Trump's ahead, and he'll probably be ahead up until the near the end. I think that Nikki Haley's best chance is to personally just stay in till the very end, fight this all the way, and and again, with Donald Trump's legal problems going on right now, like, I really think that is one of probably maybe her best opportunity to stay in and stick in and say, look, we've got Trump under indictment. I'm not under indictment, and I have a chance of actually winning this. I don't believe he does, and you can see that in the polls. So the reality is that Nikki Haley is the only other candidate in the field. Everyone else has dropped out and pretty much supported Trump. That's the list of it going right now. I think the reality is that she should fight this all the way to the end, but it's going to be a hard-fought fight. Trump. I predicted Trump would lose in Iowa to Ron DeSantis. That didn't happen. He led the field. I predicted Nikki Haley would win in New Hampshire. That didn't happen. Trump led the field, although Nikki Haley at least had some stuff going. So I can't make a prediction just because I know that my predictions have been wrong. I don't want to go 0 for 3. I'm 0 for 2 already.
Fair enough. So, Dad, what's your take?
So, I mean, my take just completely regarding Nikki Haley, it's like roughly 3/4 of her voter group, they're Democrats that just don't like Donald Trump. So even if she does stay in the race up until actual election night, even if she was the nominee, I do not think she would beat Joe Biden. I'm just being truthful about that. I don't think she could beat Joe Biden, simply because she might be running with the Republican Party, but Nikki Haley pretty much has turned the entire Republican Party against her. So, if Donald Trump is taken off the, main presidential election ballot, I think most of the MAGA Republicans, they're not going to go out and vote. They're going to take up arms. It's going to be like mass protests around the entire country over it. However, speaking of Trump, it's really funny that every time he gets indicted, his support numbers just keep going up. I mean, you can look at his polls. Every time he gets indicted, his support goes up. So, what they're trying to do is indict him, get him off the ballot, right? But none of the charges they bring up on him have stuck. None of them stuck. And, it's almost like you're sitting here watching it. It's political persecution front and center. They've tried indicting him, what was this, number 5 now? Number 4? Whichever it is. Nothing has stuck. It's political persecution. It's not right, and it shouldn't be happening.
I also agree as well. Nikki Haley also isn't even fit to run for governor.
Well, son, what do you think?
Well,
I already just said it.
I think you made an interesting point that a lot of Nikki Haley's support right now is coming from Democrats. So I guess my question to Neo is, do we really want the top of our ticket, our Republican Party, to be somebody who is loved by the left for whatever reason?
I would dispute that. She's not, her groundswell is not Democrats. I mean, again, she's got a ton of Republicans, behind her. She has, for example, Paul Ryan. She's got,
he's the biggest rhino there is. I know him personally. He lives in my town.
Does he?
she's got Asa Hutchinson. Like with the House of Representatives right now, like a lot of them, yes, have endorsed Trump, and there's a lot of governors and such who have done that too, in the U.S. Senate. But the fact of the matter is that Nikki Haley does have actual Republicans, not Democrats. The fact of the matter is that Democrats don't want her to run. This is not a race that they want to have with Trump versus Haley, because Haley is not appealing to Democrats. There's no progressive that's going to support Nikki Haley, and she's not out for their vote. She's marketed herself as a person to Republicans and to independents, not to Democrats. There might be some Democrats who might, with frustration with Joe Biden, potentially on election night go for Nikki Haley, but her real base is, Republicans and independents, because independents again decide federal elections. They decide the national elections. They can swing whatever they feel like voting is going to usually be the winner, because they essentially move the pendulum in the direction of the winner. And so I think what Nikki Haley support is that a lot of independents like her. Now, some of those independents might just happen to usually vote Democrat, but I would not say that she is beloved by Democrats, especially by progressives. Progressives hate her guts because, she is hawkish and neoconservative, and they are not. And they actually would prefer Trump because, one, they feel they can beat him, but two, they also, just think that they also are afraid of Nikki Haley at the end.
Interesting. So I guess now I want to kind of get your guys' thoughts or take on who you guys. So I mean, I think we can all agree that Trump's probably going to be the nominee. So who do you guys think would be his best choice for VP, or who would you want to see as VP?
In all honesty, considering the whole abortion thing going on right now, I honestly would like to see Kristi Noem be his vice president pick. She just got out of the governor's office for, well, she finished her governorship, right? So she just got off on a high. The economy's booming. I think she would be a solid pick. And, if he goes with Kristi Noem, awesome. That just means my prediction was right. If he picks between him or the representative from New York, I keep forgetting her name like all the time. It's some weird name, but I think she would be a solid pick for him. But in all honesty, I would put my money on the fact he's more than likely going to pick Kristi Noem.
I would also like to see Chrissy in there as well. Same thing with Psycho Dad. I mean, his Psycho Dad's opinion.
Okay. I'm looking up that New York senator's name because I forgot it. But
Mm-hmm.
well, son, what do you think?
Well, I would be happy with Kristi Noem. Elise Stefanik is who you're thinking of. You could have just asked me.
That's her name. That's her name.
I agree. She's like a no-name, and she's really, from what I've seen from her, she's boring and dull, and is not going to excite anybody. But Kristi Noem was not my first choice. And this is a name that's kind of starting to float around a little bit, but I was on this before anybody else was, and I would really like it if the junior senator Katie Britt from Alabama would be Trump's VP. I mean, she's young, she's charismatic, she's a true conservative, she's a good Christian. She has done good work in the Senate, even though she hasn't been there that long. She can go around and say she's not a Washington elite because she hasn't been there for decades. Trump and her are on good terms. He endorsed her, and she ended up winning with his endorsement. So I think it would make sense, and it would bring a lot to the ticket, I think, and it would help Trump win back the moderate, the white suburban women that he lost in 2020, which cost him the election.
know what? The Alabama senator that you were just talking about, I did forget about her, and you know what? You are correct. She is younger. She's made a huge impact already, and she's barely been in politics. So if she was a VP pick, and like you said, it would help him win the suburban moms that he lost in 2020, then I believe if she was VP this time, she would probably more than likely run for actual presidency in 2028. Which, I wouldn't have a problem with. I'd be completely okay with that. And, there's no honesty, once this election's over, they got to start picking who they're going to put up for 2028. And I believe Senator from Alabama would be a great pick. Chrissy Nome, but not Nikki Haley. Definitely not.
What's funny?
Nikki Haley running in 2028, if that ever happens.
All right, Neil, what do you think?
Will.
Well, I'm gonna support Nikki Haley all the way to the end, and I hope she fights this all the way to the end. And I've tried to reach out to people in AZ, trying to volunteer for her. I don't know why they don't reach out to me, but anyway, okay. So let me just go. So let's say Trump wins the nomination. Okay. If he were to make a pick for a VP, and not saying he will, not saying I want him to win, I think that the best options that he could make in this regard would probably be Ben Carson. I think that Ben Carson is a good conservative guy, very smart, well-spoken. He might help temper some of the fears that people have over Trump's bombasticness and nature, and perhaps maybe also bring a good face to the administration if they were to win. So I think that Dr. Ben Carson would be a good choice. I think I think also he should consider Nikki Haley, and I would if he were to win. The reality is that as much as maybe members of Trump's base hate, Nikki Haley and other individuals in the for example, who are neoconservative or neoconservative aligned, they should not be pushing them away, particularly if when they're faced with a second potential Biden administration. So I think the best choice would be Dr. Ben Carson, but that's my opinion. But again, I'm not supporting him.
Okay, so I kind of think Ben Carson is old news, and I never was really ever excited by him even back in 2016. I think he's very lackluster, and I don't know. I think it really has to be a woman at this point. I would have said it had to have been a woman even before the overturning of Roe v. Wade, just because the white suburban woman is what was the final nail in the coffin for Trump in 2020. That was the demographic that shifted away from him the most, that killed him in the swing states. But now even more so after this whole abortion thing, we're going to need a woman on the ticket to subdue some of the anger about that. Because, Biden right now is set to lose. And I feel that would be his only saving grace, would be to run on the abortion issue.
I just don't feel that.
You don't what?
Well, I don't feel that Republicans should moderate on the abortion issue. That's just not my opinion. With regards to whoever a female candidate may be, hey, that's a potential option. But again, I'm as a disclaimer to those who know me, I've already said that I'm supporting Nikki Haley all the way to the end, and I won't make a final decision until then. If the option that I don't want should happen.
Well, I think we can. Would you probably agree that the ship has sailed for Haley to be Trump's VP?
Well, I think at this point, yes, because it was teased, and I think that a lot of people behind supporting Trump's were like, no, we won't support that, and so Trump said, all right, I won't go for that. So I think at this point, it's going to be It's going to be a slugfest, and Nikki Haley has a fight to win, but I'll be supporting her to the end, and I hope she can pull it off. I believe she can too, but we'll have to see because again, Trump has a lot of momentum, and he's been winning so far. He won in Iowa, and he won in New Hampshire. The evidence, the trend is probably going to follow. I'm not, I'm not, I'm not a, not, del- I'm I'm hopeful, but I'm not, foolish.
Okay, yeah. So I guess the debate I kind of wanted all of us to have was the debate between conservatism and liberalism while we're waiting for some results to come in.
Well, I mean, in simple terms, liberalism is more than likely the end of what we know as democracy, and conservatism is trying to save it.
Well, Dad, at its most basic form, what does conservatism mean to you?
My opinion, it means you honor, just decent human nature. You live by the Bible, you stay faithful, you live by the Bible, you go to church, you're an honest, hardworking man, you go to work, wife stays home, takes care of the kids, just classic values that, used to be upheld in this country. You used to get up and say the pledge every morning in school, but, we had to take that away because, being patriotic about your country is just frowned upon now. But in my book, that's what traditional conservatism is.
Okay, okay. Neo?
Well, I've actually been doing some writing on what I for some neoconservative stuff, and I've sort of thought I was going to release it like as a Twitter, like speech stuff and things like that that I've been doing. But I might just, I might instead just, because I'm considering what to do about it, but I have been putting some thoughts down, and I might just name it the neoconservative alphabet. But I do think that with conservatism, it means a lot to different people, but I think that for me, conservatism means Western civilization, Western values, uh, cultural Christianity, freedom, liberty. Now, obviously, those mean different things to different people, but I think the basic premise of liberty and freedom means the protection of the values that make us free. Which would be Christianity, the family, faith. Uh, those mean important to me. Those are important to me as a neoconservative, and not just here at home, but also making sure that Western civilization and America export those ideas abroad and have them here. Because as America is, the protector of the conservative tradition. Just like, uh, I debate this with people, but I mean, again, in my opinion, America is the heir to the Roman Empire. It's the heir to the Persian Empire. It's the heir to Imperial Athens. Beacons and shining lights of Western civilization and of conservative tradition. And therefore, it must not only keep those values and enforce those values here, but also internationally. And that's, to me, conservatism means that. It's the protection of the family, the protection of tradition, protection of faith, and those values that make us free.
All right. Well, I guess to me, conservatism means Christian values, low taxes, small government, states' rights, low regulation. But Dad, I kind of have a bone to pick with you on because you talk about Christian values and everything else, but you've got some kind of contradictory views on conservatism.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, for example, I mean, you think it's okay for like teenagers to have sex.
That's not what I said at all. Where are you getting that from?
You have said that in the past, considering
No, I haven't.
you let me have sex as a teenager.
Okay, everyone's bound to their own choices. I'm not going to physically stop you. Okay, life is sown by the choices you make. Yeah, I didn't stop you, but I tried to raise you right. I instilled the values in you, but you just didn't appear them.
So, all right. Well, Neil, what do you think on that particular topic?
Well, I debated that, even though it wasn't even the point of my debate. Like I was doing a talk like on Twitter, and the guy that you want to invite to debate, Micah Irfin, he and I got into this debate because we got into the debate of morality, and he was of this opinion like, oh well, it doesn't matter if teenagers engage in sexual activity, I did it, and I'm just like, no, it's not okay, and I'm not saying that because not just because I didn't do it, but because it's not appropriate whatsoever. I think the problem with conservatism and versus liberalism, and in particular libertarianism, is that the infection of libertarianism in the Republican Party has created, unfortunately, a faction in Republican circles that is okay with a certain amount of immoral degeneracy. I mean, for example, the Republican parties has softened on the issue of weed. It's softened on the issue of drugs. There's even a push, although not a big one. There's even a push now to try to soften hearts and minds on the issue of prostitution in the Republican Party because of the libertarian influence. The Freedom Caucus, for example. I think that's it. Um, and the fact of the matter is that conservatism, is what I mentioned before. What conservatism means to me, what freedom is. Freedom is the protection and of conservatism is protecting the values which make us free, which is family, faith, tradition. Those things make us free. And the problem with libertarians is that they say, oh, well, no, we have to be able to do whatever we want, whenever we want, and that will make us free. And, there is no greater tyranny in an anarchy. And so I'm completely opposed to teenagers engaging in sexual activity. The reality is that, look, a teenager cannot vote, a teenager cannot do drugs, a teenager cannot smoke. It's up to parents and the schools to stop that behavior and to not allow it, and to even punish it, because the problem with schools is that they know it's happened, and rather than try to do more efforts to stop it, they've sort of like taken the position, well, if it happens, we'll just give them birth control. And I'm like, no, you don't want your kids engaging in this disgusting behavior. And same with parents. Parents aren't able to always be around their kids. They can teach kids their values, but at the end of the day, kids have to also live those values. But it's also important for parents not just to teach those values, but to live out those values, because the kids are more likely to live a better, more moral life if they see their parents living that life. And obviously, unfortunately, some kids fall by the wayside and they choose to do their own thing. And there's, for example, some of the most immoral kids that I've ever met were actually pastors' sons, and it's sometimes, unfortunately, they fall away and do their own thing. But yeah, I'm completely opposed to that. I think there needs to be more morality in the home and in the schools. It's just not. It needs to come back. And
I'm back, guys.
Hey, whoever has that annoying background noise, turn it off. Like, you should have enough common sense to not be playing noise while we're streaming. But yeah, Neil, you made a really good point about how one of the most immoral people you've ever met was a pastor's kid. Believe me, I know firsthand that churchgoers can be some of the worst among us, and some of the biggest hypocrites and least conservative people I've ever met in my life. So I'm not going to name names, but I'll go into a short little story about this. But I used to be friends with a group, with a church group, and I'm somebody who doesn't go every Sunday, but I'm religious. But they had a family, they had a bunch of kids. The husband was the pastor, and they were supposed to be like examples for Christianity and all this stuff. And then later down the line, one of them ends up going to jail, gets kicked out. He lives on the street, lives in his car. The other one runs away from home to go live with her crappy boyfriend in some trailer park. The other one gets addicted to heroin. The oldest daughter gets knocked up with not being married and goes and finds the scummiest guy on the planet, which is so typical. Why women are attracted to garbage is beyond me. But this girl in particular was attracted to even crappier men. So she got knocked up, and this idiot just took off and left. So now she's raising a kid by herself, not married, and the whole family is just a complete joke. The pastor had to step down from the church because he was so embarrassed. So yeah, that I totally understand that, and they they would drive the family. I'm not gonna get into any more of that. That's just all right. So what was I gonna say? Oh yeah. So I guess Psycho Dad has been wanting to bring this up, so I thought maybe you two could have this discussion on the whole foreign policy debate.
The foreign policy debate. I mean, my take on foreign policy is, yeah, we'll help you, but if you keep coming back to us begging for money to fight your battles for you, why don't we just go in ourselves? Like, we're not going to keep feeding your wars. I mean, I don't want to spread war across the world. Like, if I was in a position of power, I would give you some money, and if you came back to beg to me for more, I would be like, no, you have to figure it out. Sorry. We cannot bail the world's problems out. Sorry, we can't do it. If you look at our country, there's a border crisis that's been going on for 3 years. We have people of militant age entering the country. You have these same people committing crimes. Look at New York City. What was it? A group of foreign migrants beat a New York City cop almost to death in the street. They get released without bail. Nothing's happening to them. And I guarantee you, they might have a court date, but these guys are going to vanish. So even still, if your foreign policy is, oh, we got to help the other world's borders, but not our own, the country's going to fall apart and collapse.
Well, I don't think I've ever said that we should look at the other country's problems and never deal with ours. I believe that you can chew gum and walk at the same time. The fact of the matter is that you can deal with foreign policy and domestic policy. They're not separate to the point where, oh, I got to do one or do the other. I think you can do both in the same context, where we're able to be in Afghanistan and Iraq and also try to deal with the illegal immigration issue. It's gotten worse, unfortunately, recently, and that's because of the policies of the Biden administration, which has absolutely exacerbated it, because this administration doesn't have a policy when it comes to the border. It's, essentially, letting in the progressives, which represent a good portion of the Biden administration, into the White House has had disastrous consequences. If a neoconservative administration under my, if I, for example, let's say, for example, I could literally wave a wand and decide what would happen at the border. There would be a wall within 6 months. There would be a immediate fixing of the illegal immigration system and the immigration system. There would be obviously a lot of deportations, maybe massive ones, particularly for illegal immigrants who have recently come here. Anyone with a felony would not be here. People who are not showing up for the court dates would get all the immigration judges we could possibly get, and even get some more, to ensure that we could actually, get these hearings done and see, okay, who has a valid asylum claim and who is just an economic migrant, okay? And then figure out, okay, do we give visas out or do we not? And at that point, I think the most critical, that would be done if I were in charge. So I don't think I have this perspective, oh, well, it's only foreign policy or domestic policy, choose. I'm of the opinion that you can chew gum and walk at the same time. And the issues of foreign policy matter in our domestic policy, okay? Because let's look at the Afghan crisis, okay? If with the withdrawal, you had tens of thousands of Afghans wanting to get to the country, who then automatically fled to, where did they flee? They fled to the West, they fled to Europe, they fled to Britain or Germany or the United States, wherever they could go. And that crisis happened because we said, "Oh, Afghanistan's not our problem. Let them deal with it." Well, when we leave a theater in which the enemy have not surrendered, in which the enemy are still fighting, and we think that they won't cause a crisis that will affect us domestically, we are seeing now that that is not the case. And so the so again, the two matter. I'm again, when it comes to empire, Rome Rome existed. Dealt with border policy, but it also expanded its empire. Imperial Athens had immigration policy, but it also expanded its empire. Persia dealt with immigration policy. In fact, Persians were a minority in their own empire, and yet they expanded their empire. I'm not of the opinion that you can't. So I'm not of the opinion that it's either one or the other. I can do both.
I mean, Neo, in the past, when you were on one of the prior debates, we were talking about Ukraine, and your biggest argument for us to keep sending money to Ukraine was, oh, they're fighting the Russians, so we don't have to. But it doesn't seem to be the case. It seems that they're just at a stalemate and they're just killing each other off of our money. And Zelensky has no initiative to actually push the Russians out of the country. He just wants to stagnate the war. I mean, recently he's talking about firing his top military advisor who's been holding the Russians at bay. Why would he want to fire his top guy that is actually doing something? It's almost like Zelensky's begging us for the money from us so that he can pocket it himself, because in all honesty, the war should have been over. From everything we've heard, that the Russians are losing terribly, the Russians are getting destroyed left, right, and center off NATO vehicles. But the fact of the matter is, how are the Russians not pushed out of Ukraine, given this war's been going on for 2 years almost? But in regards to your take a little bit earlier regarding that the United States is the spiritual successor to the Roman and the Persian empires, that is just not true in any way, shape, or form. The whole purpose of NATO being invented was to prevent a third world war. And if the U.S., the main person of NATO, started invading countries and turning into the Roman Empire, everyone would turn on us and probably nuke us and destroy us. The whole point of NATO is to prevent that political expansion like that, to conquer the world in a series. So the fact that you think that is, I mean, in my opinion, is like way out there, insane to me. But going to Afghanistan, once we killed Osama bin Laden, it was pretty much, we had to stay there, and it was just going to become an endless pit of money. Like, we would just always have to be there 24/7 just to keep patrolling. It came to a point with Afghanistan where if we weren't there, the country was going to collapse. And what happened as soon as we left? It collapsed completely. The the Taliban, when we first started fighting them, were just people in turbans and just cloths. Now the Taliban are wearing full tac gear, got modern day M4A1 carbines, they got MRAPs, they got Black Hawk helicopters, they got MQ-9 Reaper drones. They're a modernized military from when we left. If it was up to me for the whole Afghanistan withdrawal, it would be like, all right, we're taking all of our stuff and we're bringing it back. We're not leaving any of this here. But then again, the country was bound to collapse once we left anyway, because the only thing holding that country together was us. They didn't want a democracy. They couldn't sustain a democracy. So as soon as the U.S. left, it was bound to fall. But that's what I think regarding it.
So may I respond, or do we have a time limit?
No, you can respond. We're just waiting on results, so we have endless time to talk.
So let me go backwards. So starting with your point in Afghanistan, the American government and the American military were keeping that country alive, and for good reason. There was a real benefit for us being there, because the fact of the matter is we destroyed Al Qaeda. The Al Qaeda as an organization is gone for all intents and purposes, and that's why we were there, to destroy Al Qaeda and make sure that they could never again operate like a force that operate as a terrorist force that could strike the U.S. homeland when they did so on 9/11 in a most terrible fashion. Our goal was also to ensure that Afghanistan would become a hotbed for terrorism ever again. And that goal we failed in. And that goal should have been achieved, and it needs to be achieved now and in the future. The problem is that the Afghans did fight. I do not buy this myth that the Afghans didn't want freedom, that the Afghans didn't want Western style democracy or republican government. Over 60,000 Afghan soldiers in the entire time that we were in Afghanistan died for that very reason, and a larger number of civilians because they wanted it. Now, there are obviously different factions within Afghanistan that wanted to throw us out. The Taliban, again, have had people in their country who supported their rule, and then they also had outside support from Pakistan. There were also people in Afghanistan who didn't, for example, there were some left-wing groups in Afghanistan who were like anti-imperialist sort of type nonsensers that were like, oh, well, when America leaves, we can deal with our affairs on ourselves, and we don't need them to deal with the Taliban, which was absolute nonsense. The reality is, though, is that there were tons of Afghans who wanted what we had, and they fought for it and died for it. The problem is that, again, America did not do what it should have done, which was bring in hundreds, maybe even thousands of Christian missionaries into the country to proselytize and create a bigger demographic of Christians within Afghanistan in order to lessen the amount of Muslim adherents, in order to create a more Western-style, American-style democracy, Republican democracy, which should have happened, and it didn't happen because of outside pressure from secularists. And the next point you say oh, well, America is not Rome, and no, America is essentially, the heir successor to Rome and to the Persian Empire, because NATO, yes, you say, oh, NATO is an alliance of nations to prevent war, yes. But NATO is a nation of willing nations that believe in the idea, or at least should believe in the idea, of Western-style supremacy, of Western civilization, of those values, and of defending those values. See, NATO is a military alliance, and it is also a military defensive alliance, but it has also been a military offensive partnership. For example, in Afghanistan. So, this idea, for example, Imperial Athens had lots of different city-states that were part of the Athenian Empire, even if they were not necessarily directly controlled by Athens, in the same way of NATO. These nations of NATO that may not be controlled directly by America, but they're heavily influenced by it, in the same way that Persia and Rome had client kingdoms. We are just like Imperial Athens, Persia, and Rome all represent the great values of Western culture and civilization, and the domination of it. And the final, I forget the final point, but that you brought up. But the fact of the matter is that I don't believe in this idea of conservatism as simply stay put in your own home and that's it. If your next door neighbor or a person down the street is beating their wife, you can't really say, oh, well, I've got a broken fence, I got to fix that, rather than deal with that. I think you can do two things at once. You can fix the broken fence and keep out the guy prowling into your neighborhood, and also go down the street and beat the hell out of the guy beating up his wife.
Yeah, man.
Well, son, what do you think?
Well, this is your
You wanna
rebuttal.
counter either of us?
This is your rebuttal.
Well, it was like I was saying before, the fact of the matter is the United States is not the spiritual successor to Rome. It never will be. Back during those times, warfare was fought with crossbows, spears, shields. It was basically mass groups of people essentially going out in the field, firing archer arrows at each other. The times of warfare now it's more or less hit and run tactics. Small hit squads going out. You might have a couple Humvees, a couple MRAPs with like 2 or 3 squads of people going out. You know, it's not like massive armies clashing full on anymore. It's more small scale, and you know, I don't think the world will ever see another, you know, Roman Empire or another Persian Empire. It's just not feasible in the days of modern combat. It'll just never happen.
Well, the differences in change of combat don't necessarily affect whether or not America is the spiritual successor to an idea. For example, you know, and I'd also disagree with your assumption that warfare is just going to go small scale and it's going to be very individualized. The fact of the matter is that over the last 20 years, yes, that has been the case because we have fought an asymmetric war against terrorist insurgents in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and in other places. And so that requires a different strategy to beat them. And we were successful in Iraq, we were not successful in Afghanistan. There, but that does not change the. But again, if America were to go to war with China, which could happen within the next 10 to 20 years, that would be essentially the massive scale fighting that we would have seen in, you know, World War II, in which there were large contingents of armies, of tanks, of men, and all sorts fighting in the field. So, I take the perspective essentially of General Ridgway from Korea, in which a lot of the Air Force guys like Curtis LeMay were essentially arguing that, you know, Air Force was the future. If all you needed to do was drop a bunch of bombs on people, and that would win a war. Drop an atomic bomb, bam, we win. You know, it's for example, they had evidence to support their claims because America's air power destroyed Nazi Germany and wrecked Japan, and then we won finally against Japan with the atomic bomb. But General Ridgway was right, and when he argued that when you have superpowers competing, and even in you're going to have to go not with the bomb, because everybody knows that's mutual destruction. You have to instead be prepared to fight massive war, massive scale, infantry, tanks, because that is the way war has always been, and it's going to develop. And so now we've seen asymmetric warfare, just like now we're seeing today. But that's not against players like China or Russia, and right now we're seeing Russia and Ukraine not engaged in asymmetric warfare like, you know, what was happening before. That's full-blown, full-scale fighting. That is the future of what I see going to happen with America. We need to be prepared for that possibility. Not with Russia, because Russia is not going to be fighting America. It's fighting Ukraine, and I don't think they're going to win. And even if they did, they would not be able to take on America right after that. I think that America's biggest military threat is obviously China, and for good reason. And I think that we're going to have to be prepared within the next 10 to 20 years to either cripple them so much so that they cannot military wage war against us, or we have to be prepared to fight a actual military conflict.
Okay, so I'd just like to point out, you know, China versus America, right? That would, and what you said, I agree with. It would be full scale warfare. You know, it'd be infantry, tanks, planes, all that, ships, everything. But the core of the problem is the fact that the American people at this very moment are so weak minded that if it ever came down to the U.S. versus China on their territory, of course, we would lose, because our country's been being sold out for the last 3 years. The core of the people in this country, if more than 90% of military-aged males don't qualify for military service. So the fact of the matter is, when the people that you're trying to recruit aren't even fit for military duty, and I don't know if you know this or not, but the military's been going through a recruitment crisis for, I'd say, probably the last 10 years. They've been struggling to meet quotas. And in case you didn't know, I'm a military vet, so I've seen what happens. I was on a ship. I was in the Navy for 5 years. My ship was undermanned at a certain point. You know, we had like 600 people. We're meant to have 900. You know, those 300 people make all the difference. If you're missing 300 cogs in the machine doesn't work. So if we ever were to get into a full-on scale battle with China, yeah, we might be more technologically advanced, but they have the mass. China's communist, so it's a requirement for them to do military service. And you have the left-wing freak jobs in America trying to destroy the country, and none of those people believe in military service. They disrespect veterans around every corner. I'm sure maybe a handful of liberals care that you're a veteran, and they're like, what, thank you for what you do. But the fact of the matter is, the core of the American fighting force is non-existent anymore. Nobody has the gall to go and fight. Everyone's weak, and that's the main problem with America. If we ever got into a full-scale war, we're going to lose. Now, if it's on our turf, that's a different story, because this country has so many guns, and for example, myself, I have 4, so I have firearms in my household. Okay, controversial take, holy cow, but if they were to invade America, if China was to invade America, they might capture DC, but they can't hold it. They would not hold America for more than 1 year tops, because that's when the people of this country would realize, oh, I don't like this. I'm going to need communist control. I'm going to fight back now. So if it came to that, then I'd say the American people would actually care and fight for what they believe in. But when it comes to us versus China on their turf, we're screwed. We're going to lose.
I think that problem you highlight about recruitment comes to my criticisms of libertarianism and liberalism in general, because the military has largely been a conservative, outfit. Most conservatives joined the military because, again, they wanted to serve their country. It was patriotic. It was a part of the conservative tradition. The problem with, unfortunately, today is that we've been infected by a lot more libertarianism, which has created, which again and again, libertarianism is an extension of liberalism. I don't agree with people's opinions that libertarianism is a form of conservatism. I wholeheartedly disagree with that. And what has happened, unfortunately, is that now we've seen this infection that I call of libertarianism pervade into right-wing and Republican circles, where it's created this sense, unfortunately, where, oh, no, I don't need to serve. Oh, the war state, all of this, let me get my weed and my heroin and shoot that up and go be a degenerate and go, engage in, all sorts of degenerate, polyamorous sex or whatever. This has been created by the values of conservatism being watered down by all the wrong elements. And I think that one of the biggest things that we need to do in the schools, in particular, is really focus on physical health and and dieting. I don't think that schools really focus on that. I think that PT, like when I was in high school, like PT, just do, some exercises and stuff like that. No, there needs to be a serious effort to ensure young people are healthy and of a proper weight, because the obesity that we see in America today is it's not just ungodly and sick, it's absolutely degenerate, and it should not be happening in a country that is so developed like ours. Like, we have unfortunately let our excess just essentially make us corrupt. Like, it has made us to the point where we, have created, unfortunately, in America, the incentives to absolutely live absolutely unhealthy lifestyles. And I know this because I used to be 235 pounds. 230 pounds. I'm now 170, 169 in that range. Because I can see myself how easy it is to fall into that trapping. Depression, sadness, but also laziness and apathy. I think that the way that the way to restore the sense of America, to ensure that we can win our wars, and that we should, because I agree with General Ridgway's proposition that if America goes to war, it needs to fight it and win it. There's no sense in fighting a war you're not prepared to win or you're willing to win. But it comes down, again, this is why I feel that neoconservatism is going to be the solution to this problem, because libertarianism has failed, and that is unfortunately now becoming the dominant strand in the Republican Party under the guise of, MAGA. And there's now there needs to be a change, and it needs to be now, because you're right. Unfortunately, there are a ton of Americans who don't even want to fight for their country, and I used to be one of them. I used to be of that perspective, oh, I don't want to die for America. Why would I want to die out there for this? But my perspectives have changed within the last few years, now to the point where I would be willing to fight and die for my country because I want to be a part of that noble tradition. So I can understand the problem, but I see the solution.
I mean, my biggest problem was, like if you want to sign up and join the military, fine, but just realize this: you're not fighting on values for America. You're fighting on values to further politicians' pockets and their foreign policy ideas. If you join the military now, you're pretty much fighting for Joe Biden and letting him support destroying the country. That's literally what you're serving for. And yeah, I get it. People say, "Oh, you're the military. You're supposed to uphold the Constitution." Yes, but there are some crazy people in the military that are so brainwashed deep in the hole that they will believe anything the president says. They will believe anything someone that's a senator, any of that, will tell them. And the fact of the matter is, this country's been in a downward spiral for the last 3 years, and Joe Biden has done nothing to fix it. And the fact that he's letting migrants in Illinois and California become police officers and carry a firearm is absolutely insanity. So you have basically cops that haven't gone through any police officer academy, carrying a firearm, being able to issue tickets, arrest people, or even gun them down. And there's more than likely not going to be any repercussions over this. But I do like what you said regarding the obesity rate in America. It's out of control, and it needs to be actually hammered down. And I think at a young age, people should be taught the benefits of nutrition, and they should be taught, how to properly diet themselves, how to properly, eat. But in order for this to become a reality in adulthood, I think big corporations have to start paying a livable wage so people don't have to work 2 or 3 jobs, especially during this economy. You got people working, 18 hours a day, going home, going to sleep. Where are they going to find time to go, work out for an hour? They work out, they eat, they got to go to bed, wake up, 4 hours of sleep, or even less than that. It's just so draining. So in order for this idea of people to become fit and able to serve the country if the time need be, the entirety of democracy has to arguably, people that work jobs and get paid more and have more downtime, but then CEOs will make less money. Yeah, but guess what? If your workforce is happy, then they won't have a problem when you ask them, hey, you mind working a little bit overtime today? But in order to get to the point of us being able to do this, then there needs to be some major changes made and some major workers' rights to actually be recognized in this society.
Well, I'm glad we at least agree on the obesity issue, and there are definitely solutions for that need to be done right now. I don't agree with the idea that, look, I understand your concern, because when I talk to someone about joining the military now, a family member of mine, expressed that I should wait until the upcoming election and see who wins, and then make that decision. But I disagree with the idea, however, that we should do nothing, and I regret now, being a neoconservative, not having made this decision earlier. But yeah, that's all I'll say on that.
I mean, I hate to sound like I mean, person here, but yeah, considering your neoconservatism, by the time you were 18, that was pretty much the height of Afghanistan, and I'm actually surprised you didn't join to go over there and do some stuff, considering what you believe in. I mean, I would have honestly thought you would be a veteran, but
Well,
hey, if you had stuff going on,
because I wasn't a neoconservative then. I didn't become a neoconservative until now, and that was when I was during those times I was either I was when I was 18 I was actually a Christian anarchist, and then I became a Ron Paul libertarian, and then in a Republican, a registered Republican but a libertarian, and then I switched back and forth between libertarianism, Libertarian Party, and the Republican Party, but I was essentially a Ron Paul style libertarian. I didn't start the journey to neoconservatism until 2016 when I visited the Terezin concentration camp and the Auschwitz-Birkenau death camp. And it's not like I flipped overnight. It started then, and then the seeds started to germinate in 2020, where then I started to look at neoconservatism like much more on fully, and essentially embraced neoconservatism fully in 2021 or 22. Yeah, no, 2021. And then eventually, started me on my journey now, my activism.
interesting. So, I mean, from what I gathered, you were hopping around. So, I mean, say neoconservatism in a couple years from now is just completely like not is misaligned with what you believe. Are you going to change again, or are you just going to stick with it till the end?
No, I'm sticking with it. I don't believe in anything else. There were people. I remember when I was debating on whether on neoconservatism. Like I remember when I was a I thought that maybe I could be a neo-libertarian, which would have been like a form of libertarianism, but an interventionist one. But I eventually rejected libertarianism because I saw it as wholly degenerate. I having been a libertarian and being told that, oh well, people will do the right thing if they're allowed to make decisions for themselves all the time. And I really learned that that's not the case. If you give people way too much freedom, they will do awful, degenerate, and even evil things. The unfortunately we all are of a fallen nature. I may not be a practicing Christian, but I certainly am a cultural Christian, and I believe in those ideas that, man is fallen, and ultimately, if man could do it, evil, man would do it if there was no punishment or ramifications for it. So no, I won't be changing anytime soon to neo-libertarianism or anything else. I'm fully committed to this because I believe it wholeheartedly.
All right. I mean, I think arguably a huge problem in our society is coming from the fact that there is no morals, there is no values. As soon as a female turns 18, a lot of them start selling their bodies on the internet. There's just no morals or ethics anymore. I mean, that came from no one's really believing in the Bible, no one really studies religion. People are just out here doing their own crazy thing. And the fact of the matter is, 30 years ago, if you were a corner worker, you got criticized. Nowadays, it's almost like it's accepted. And I think that like people getting shamed, and like if you're doing some disgusting, morally unethical things, like you should be criticized, and that should be acceptable. But we're now in a society where you can do those things and you don't get morally criticized. You don't get told, hey, you're not going to go to heaven. You are a disgusting person. You should stop this. And the problem is the people in the government aren't stopping it either. They're not banning sites like OnlyFans where women are taking advantage of men, that like weak-minded men that are paying money subscription to see naked pictures of them on the internet, when you can go to any other site and go see it. But that's a huge problem in our society, and it needs to be addressed. And then we can get on the right path of reinstating a powerful society of, strong-minded men, women that respect themselves, and we could be back on track to actually being successful. But at this current rate, we're just going further and further in the hole.
Crickets.
How has
I
Nevada
don't.
not reported
I don't.
anything?
I don't have.
I'm just throwing it out there. But sorry, Neil. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I don't have anything further to add to that, Doug. I would just say that the infiltration of libertarianism has been and the normalization of it, and which is not only expanded in the Republican circles, but even Democrats. There's this growing wing now, what you call libertarian socialists, has had absolutely detrimental effects to America. And I say this as a former libertarian. This is why I'll be opposed to it for the rest of my life.
Well,
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Sorry, go ahead.
well, Dad, I wanted to raise a concern that you had over some of the Discord conversation. You had a concern with Neocon's comment that war is good. So I don't know. Maybe you want to talk about that a little bit.
I mean, in certain aspects, when it's justified, war is good. But the problem with, say after 9/11 was almost all of those people were Saudi Arabian, and we invade Iraq. How does that make any sense? They weren't from Iraq, but we went to Iraq first, and then we went to Afghanistan later.
That's not
But,
true at all. That's not accurate at all. Okay, so first of all,
then I'll let you know.
we invaded Afghanistan in 2001, a month after the attacks. We invaded Afghanistan, not Saudi Arabia, because Afghanistan was harboring Al Qaeda, the terrorists who carried out the attack. Yeah, they might have been born in Saudi Arabia, but they were set up in Afghanistan, and that's where their training camps were. We didn't invade Iraq until years later in 2003. We didn't go to Iraq first.
Okay, sorry, I confused the two. But during World War II, that's a great example of war is justified and war is great. We're fighting against people that truly believe that there's one master race in the entire world. And Japan bombed us. They attacked us. All right, fine. You want to go to war, Japan? Cool. We're right back at you. And World War One, another example. If we didn't intervene in World War One, the U.S. might have looked drastically different. But in a certain sense, Afghanistan up to a point, yeah, it was profitable and it was good. But after we killed Osama bin Laden, it was just irrelevant and we should have left. But other than that, if we inevitably get drawn into the war in Ukraine, is that a good war? No, because it didn't start with us. We were just throwing them in an endless money pit. And I guarantee you it's going to get to the point where they're going to be like, hey, we need your help, and we're going to have to go bail them out. And same thing with Israel. If it comes to a point where the Israelis are like, hey, we're getting, bombarded and destroyed, we need your assistance, then we're going to have to go bail them out with our actual people. So, in a sense, war is good to a certain extent. But when the line gets crossed where it's no longer good, and it's a bad war, then you should leave.
Well, I'm glad to hear. Glad to hear that someone told the truth. That again, that the fact of the matter is that it was not Saudi Arabia that caused the attacks on 9/11. It was not Saudi Arabia that harbored Al Qaeda. It was not Saudi Arabia who sponsored the state who funded the terrorists who caused 9/11. The different again. This is something that Ron Paul tried to argue, in the mid 2000s, like with Bill O'Reilly. Oh, well, so Saudi Arabia, and I love what Bill O'Reilly had said to him in response is because it's not policy for the Saudis to do damage to the United States. It's not their policy, and the fact of the matter is that the Saudis have been fighting terrorism for years. Like Osama bin Laden hated America because in part because the Saudis had worked with America to keep Saddam Hussein out. You know, he wanted to come back from Afghanistan, and bring the jihad to Saudi Arabia and chase out Saddam Hussein from Kuwait and bring about this big Islamic revolution. And the Saudis were like, "Hell no, you're a freak. Get out of here. We don't want you here. You know, we don't want. We're gonna stick with the Americans because they're not gonna come after us once Saddam's gone. You know, I fact of the matter is that leaving Afghanistan too right after you kill Osama bin Laden would not have meant mission accomplished. The fact of the matter is that the goal was twofold, not just to destroy Al Qaeda as a military force, which we have. Yes, we were successful in that mission. I would say that even though we lost the Afghan war, Al Qaeda as a force is spent. It's not coming back. But our goal was also to ensure that Afghanistan never again became a hotbed for terrorists. And unfortunately, what the Taliban are doing is they are essentially saying, "Hey, come all the Islamic extremists and help us build our caliphate here." They're not going to stop there. They're the fact of the matter is that Al Qaeda's surviving members are joining with the Taliban because Al Qaeda is essentially spent, and what's going to happen is those Al Qaeda guys are going to bring their knowledge and their skills to the Taliban. They're also going to bring their ideology of an international caliphate to the Taliban, and so that's going to make them worse. But I would say this is that if you want to stop intervening in other countries, like if you really want to say, look, I'd rather deal with our own affairs domestically and never have to deal with a foreign affair again, then my argument is this: okay, win the war, and then win the war and come home. But don't think by leaving a combat zone to the enemy and washing your hands of something that's going to make things better, because it never does.
Well, my question to you is, what more could we have done in Afghanistan after 20 years of fighting and training the Afghan army just for it to fall within a month? I mean, what more could we have done? Like, stay another 20 years? What was the solution?
Yeah, stay another 20 years, or do what we did in Iraq when we left and we were next door in Kuwait and in Saudi Arabia, and it looked like ISIL might take over the country. There were people who said, you know what, let the Iraqis just deal with it, and if Iraq collapses, that's their problem. It's not ours. Rachel Maddow from MSNBC even suggested that America do that, because when ISIL was taking cities and driving back the Iraqi army, she did a special where she talked about the same thing happening in Vietnam, and she didn't say it outright, but she certainly suggested it to her audience that America should just let what happened in Vietnam happen to Iraq. It's not our concern. And that we should not have done, and we didn't do. Problem is, we didn't do that in Afghanistan.
Well,
We
why
didn't
was
have
it our
to-
problem?
Because Afghanistan was a nation that we built. It was a partner, and it was, by keeping the Afghan government in place, as flawed as it was keeping out the worst evil, which was the Taliban. It was just like the Shah. There's so many people who complain about the Shah, and I don't have any complaints about the Shah. I thought he was justified. But for anyone who is critical of the Shah, guess what happened? When you let him fall, he got replaced by religious fanatics who were absolutely worse than him, allegedly. And we're seeing the ramifications. We live with the ramifications of that today. So in the case of Afghanistan, all we had to have done was do what we did in Iraq, which is where we send in the Air Force and we bomb the hell out of the Taliban attacking the Afghan army, drive them back, give the Afghan army space to reorganize, regroup, and counterattack. The problem is we didn't do that. And finally, when a couple of airstrikes came in, they were far too few. They didn't really mean anything. And at that point, we simply let the Afghan army collapse, because the Afghan army, what it needed was American air power, because we didn't give them an artillery. They didn't have an artillery component in their army. Our Air Force was their artillery support. And the fact of the matter is when you pull that back, which the Biden administration did, and don't give the Afghans that, which they relied on so clearly, that allowed the Taliban to literally move from place to place without any fear whatsoever. And the limited Afghan Air Force that was available, the Taliban were actually going about and assassinating Afghan pilots because they were trying to knock out the ability for the Afghan Air Force to even stop them whatsoever. So if the Afghans were that afraid, if the Taliban's were that afraid of the limited military capabilities of the Afghan Air Force in preventing them from what they wanted to do, and which they succeeded in, which was taking over the country, how much more would the American Air Force have prevented them from doing what they wanted, even if they had still kept parts of the country? The flawed situation that we had then was a lot better than what we have now.
Well, what are any of us losing, like right here, right now, with the current situation in Afghanistan?
You're looking at it. One is American prestige and power. America is looking weak. It is looking like it won't stand up for its friends. It looks like it can be taken advantage of. And that's why you're seeing the Kremlin, for example, invade Ukraine. And then now we're having to spend billions of dollars to help keep Ukraine alive, because the Kremlin saw Afghanistan and said, well, if the Americans are just going to roll over in Afghanistan, what's to stop me from going into Ukraine and to the borders of NATO and into the Baltics maybe later and just doing the same thing? I don't think the Americans will respond. And the same thing with the refugee crisis. There are lots of refugees now from Afghanistan that are trying to gain access to the United States, and some of them have been granted asylum, others haven't. Some are coming across the border, illegally, and others have gone into Europe and created problems there. And the issue here once again comes to this: is that when America looks weak, our enemies pounce. So one, it's prestige. America relies, just like any other empire does, on projection of power. And when your opponents see you as weak, they take advantage. And so I would argue this is that there seems to be a suggestion from you that, well, what's the financial benefit for me? What financially did I lose? The billions of dollars that you are seeing being invested into Ukraine that are not being invested into America is money that we have to spend in Ukraine because we gave the impression to the Kremlin that America is weak, it's on the decline, and we're not going to support our friends. And now all that money that could have been spent on America had Afghanistan remained, because if the Taliban had been stopped by the American Air Force, if we had stopped the Taliban and said, no, you're not going to take over the country, the Kremlin would have looked at Ukraine and said, well, what if I invade Ukraine, America might do the same thing to me. So it's best not to invade Ukraine proper, just best to try to get these, disputed territories, and take what I can. When you project weakness, your enemies pounce, and as a result, there is a financial cost, and we're seeing that right now. The money that you see being invested into Ukraine that could be spent on the border is not being spent there because the Kremlin saw American weakness by us leaving Afghanistan. And that again created a situation where we saw our enemies take advantage, and there is a real financial cost to it.
Well, I didn't even just mean from a financial standpoint. I just meant in life in general. Like, what are me, you, and my dad, like right here in this moment, suffering because Afghanistan collapsed? Like, my life, I'm not losing sleep at night. I mean, that sucks for them, but I mean, hey, what am I supposed to do about it? That's their country, their problem. Us, we're not going to be able to do anything about it. Like, why even worry about it?
Well, you're seeing it now. I not only give you a financial reason, because you guys complain about the border, and I complain about it too. That money that you could have been spent on fixing the border is being spent on Ukraine because the Kremlin saw American weakness in Afghanistan and pounced. So that's creating stress for you guys. The idea that, well, we need to solve this border crisis. We have to fix it. Well, that money can't be spent now on the border because it's being spent in Ukraine because we left Afghanistan and let the Taliban take over. and our enemies saw that. And not just that, but also American prestige. There is this, and what you talked about right here. Well, how am I losing sleep? Well, earlier we were complaining about how there is this sense in America that we're on the decline, or that, degeneracy is pervasive, or that, there's this sense that America isn't worth fighting for. That problem has been created by the Afghan withdrawal. That sense of disillusionment, just like what we saw after Vietnam, was created by us leaving Afghanistan. The sense that America isn't really worth fighting for. And so this is not just a prestige issue for America. It's not just a financial issue for America. It's also a personal issue for every American that has been affected.
I mean, it was like I was saying earlier. Most of the average Americans, 18 to 25, they don't care and they will not fight for the country. It was like I was saying earlier. There's no sense for them to fight for the country. They could care less if America exists. So,
Hey, Dad, I don't mean to interrupt
and,
you,
like we were saying earlier, liberals have. Oh, sorry.
let's just pause this real quick. So we have just actually gotten our first results of the night. It only took like 3 hours. Literally been sitting here staring at 0 for 3 hours. But we have 16% of the vote in. An estimated remaining 63,000. And it's all coming from Washoe County. And guess who's winning the Republican primary right now?
Oh, Trump?
None.
Nobody.
None of these candidates.
Are you?
Yeah, 53 to 40 for none of these candidates.
What? That is messed up, dude. Trump should be winning.
No,
Not the
Caden,
Democrat.
Caden. Oh my God, you're just clueless.
He's
Just
not
stop.
on the presidential.
All right, and so yeah, 6,500 votes for none of these candidates, 4,900 for Nikki Haley, and 479 for Pence, and 124 for Tim Scott. Oh man, guys, if Haley loses this, there's no path forward. She's got to drop out right now. If she can't even win a primary with nobody but herself on the ballot, I mean, come on. It's time to call it quits. It's time to go back home and go back and go to the drawing board, figure something else out, do something else. Do something you're actually good at. So I just want to get initial thoughts from both Dad and Neo on this, so one at a time.
I mean, it was like I was saying when we first started, if she loses to none of these candidates, where she is basically the only pick, it is a, dead set indicator that you clearly have no idea what you're doing and you need to stop. And last I checked, she's not even beating Donald Trump in South Carolina, where she was the governor, which, if anything, she should have the most pull in her state, that she was the governor, because she was able to work one-on-one with the people of her state. And if she can't even win her own state, what's to say that she'll win the presidency? I mean, if none of these candidates win, I'm gonna be happy, because she's done. She's gonna have no choice but to drop out after this.
Well, that vote right there, none of the candidates. It's obvious that that's the Trump vote coming out, because Trump is not on the ballot, so therefore the Trump voters are going to say, well, let's going to vote that way. I'm hoping that Nikki Haley pulls this off and wins here. She needs to. It's important. I'm not pessimistic. I'm optimistic, but I'm not naive. I'm also realistic. But it's kind of shocking, though. I thought that I thought the margins would be worse. They're better than I thought, so I hope that she gets that the vote does improve for her better. So I think it can, and I think it should. I hope. But,
Well, as
I got proven wrong twice.
As you guys were talking, they actually called the race on the Democratic side for Biden. So right now he's at 88.8%. None of these candidates is actually beating Marianne Williamson. That's kind of interesting too. I wasn't expecting that. and they were able
Well,
to call
I
it with
mean-
16% of the vote in, so that's pretty interesting.
I mean, it's not too far off from what I said earlier that Biden would get roughly 90%. Actually, no, it's off. Because I said Biden would get 95%, and then I said Marianne would probably get like 2 or 3. I was right on that, and then there would be 1.2 to 3%. So I was a little bit off. But as it currently stands, none of these candidates is close.
Well,
But,
anyways, while we
like I
wait
was saying
for
earlier, if you still
more results to
Go.
come in, you guys can go ahead and finish your foreign policy exchange.
Yeah, I mean,
so-
I will again focus on the fact
I mean,
American prestige matters and it affects America itself and it affects the American psyche. The reason that so many people now, unfortunately, are of this mind that, what's the point, is because of what the political class did in Afghanistan, which is where they said, I'm just going to wash my hands of it and, forget it. What they did was, one, a slap in the face of every single veteran who had ever fought in Afghanistan. And it was a slap in the face to the American military to essentially say that we don't care about your sacrifices, we're doing this. And third, it's created essentially this negative atmosphere in which you see right now that occurred in America after the loss in Vietnam when Saigon was overrun. It took a while for that American prestige and that American power, sense of power, to be restored again. And I see the same thing. Seeing the same thing has happened historically. When Athens was defeated at the siege of Syracuse, and disaster had befallen its expeditionary force that had been completely lost. Tens of thousands of men literally gone. Its greatest, army, in navy, ruined and destroyed. Athens was faced with the same position where its enemies thought that at this point Athens would roll over and play dead. But Athens quickly reassembled a new navy, was built, it was manned by hardcore patriots and hardcore Athenian zealots, and they won a string of victories against the Spartans, who just recently raised a navy with Persian money. And the fact of the matter is that Athens restored its old swagger for a time period, and I think that America now faces that crossroad. Now Athens squandered its wins later, and then as a result, lost the Peloponnesian War by killing off the generals who had won its greatest victories because of superstitious nonsense. But America now has the position where we can either restore our greatness through victory, or we can go down a spiral of decline. And I know which way I want to go. I don't want to go the way of decline. I want to see America restored. I want to see America strong.
well, what? When you were saying earlier, you're like, can't to that. Oh, if we don't send money to Ukraine, we can't play about the border, which is correct. Joe Biden, his first month in office, signed so many executive orders. He could sign one today saying the border's closed, no one's allowed in, and he could shut it down right now, send money to the border, and get that all straightened out. But the problem is he won't do that because, let's be honest, he cares more about giving policies to his friends. No, he's a crook. People just won't admit it. But
You keep cutting out.
If we did do a systematic withdrawal, like if we stayed for another 20 years, right? We did a systematic withdrawal in like 2040. I guarantee you the same result probably would have happened, because once Al Qaeda got wiped out, what took their place? ISIS. Once ISIS got wiped out, something else is going to take their spot. It's just always going to be an endless hit of, oh, you wiped out this group, well, someone else took their spot, so now that's your problem. You got to deal with it. So
Okay, that's like that's kind of, but that's not a true trope. Okay, like you throw one drug dealer away, eventually, yes, another one pops up. That doesn't mean we dissolve law enforcement or say, oh, we should enforce laws because criminals will always be there. We just like we keep the military in place. There's always going to be foes to fight. Yes, each generation has its different foes to fight. That doesn't that's a nonsensical argument, because if you really take that argument face value, then why even fight crime? Why even enforce the law? Why stop bad guys? And I don't argue this idea also that the fall of Afghanistan was inevitable. It wasn't. It happened because of democratic policies that started in 2008, which was the idea that America has created its problems, which wasn't true. The Islamic fundamentalists declared war on us. They took the war to us, and we, as a result, took the war to them. The Democrats had this idea from the Obama administration that we've created our problems and therefore we should be more diplomatic. They legitimized the Taliban. The Obama administration allowed the Taliban to set up a diplomatic office in Qatar, thinking that the Taliban, if we just talk with them, they would moderate, they'd become a political organization, and that they would, put down their arms. Well, we saw that didn't happen. And then the Biden administration not only legitimized the Taliban, but literally let them take over the country. And now, this isn't talked about, but we know what's going on. The Biden administration is literally having our U.S. Air Force, conduct reconnaissance for the Taliban and give them information with regards to Al Qaeda. Sorry, not Al Qaeda, sorry, with ISIL. Because of this idea, well, I better support the Taliban because at least they're fighting ISIL, which is ridiculous because ISIL and the Taliban literally believe very similar things. Just one just believes in killing even other Muslims while the Taliban don't. This is insane. So this idea that this happened though because we didn't embrace a truly neoconservative policy, because we instead embrace this idea of America bad and America's the fault, and this infection infected the Republicans too with the rise of libertarianism in the Republican Party. So this idea that no, it wouldn't have happened, it's the same people that argue that we were going to lose Iraq. Like, for example, former Senator Harry Reid, that scumbag said we had lost the war in Iraq. Well, guess what? We didn't. We won it. I don't believe this idea that America is doomed to lose wars. We're not. We lose wars when we allow political establishment who have everything to gain by wiping their hands of something they don't want to deal with to allow us to lose wars that we shouldn't.
I mean, the thing about America is we have so much money and so many like PMC groups. Like academia is a great example. We can send academia to go do our dirty work and still instill our values. But the fact of the matter is, you proved my point in saying that ISIL is now fighting the Taliban, and like I said, that one group replaces another inevitably. And it was like I was saying, the Middle East, if we never left, we would have to be there till the end of time to make it safe, quote unquote. So at the end of the day, we would have had to inevitably just stayed in the Middle East just to keep it safe the whole entire time. And the reason it fell is because not enough people believed in democratic values, and that's why the country fell apart. Not enough people believed in what we were there for. That's why it fell.
No, it doesn't prove your point that, oh, we kill one group, place another. This idea that, oh, well, it's a ridiculous argument that we shouldn't even fight. We shouldn't. No, I didn't say it. The Taliban and ISIL are fighting each other, but that's because they're competing caliphates. Just like in the Middle Ages, there were competing caliphates. Who fought each other. There were, like, for example, the Ottomans fought the Mamelukes, and the Mongols who converted to Islam, fought uh, different as other Muslims in Iraq and in Syria and other places. Just like Timur, he was a convert to Islam, and he yet savagely tried to conquer the Ottomans and such like that, who were Muslim. This idea that again, so, just like with crime, there's always criminal elements, but that doesn't mean you stop it. It doesn't mean you don't try to destroy it. Life, that's the reality of evil. Evil is always adapting, and it's always trying to survive in one form or another, and it's your job to stomp it out wherever it comes. And yes, when you put out one fire, another fire raises later. Does that mean you stop putting out fires? No. We have, in the same context of Afghanistan too. And I would argue this is that if you want to ensure that there are people who believe in Western civilization and the values that we believe in, that you need to preach those values. And I think that would have really helped in Afghanistan would have been after we overthrew the Taliban, we should have brought in Christian missionaries from the Catholic Church, the LDS Church, the Orthodox Church, all the big denominations, and said to them, bring your missionaries, bring your preachers, help us convert Afghanistan to Christianity. We want to bring about a Western style nation, and that will require us to purge the nation of these Islamist ideologies. And that would have helped. And if we go back into Afghanistan, that is what I would do. And I want to do that. Because what has been shown is that you cannot compromise with Islamist ideology. Because there were a lot of secularists who unfortunately pushed out the more theoconservative neoconservatives and said, oh, well, we don't want to bring religion because we don't want to look imperialist, the Christopher Hitchens style interventionism, which is like, a left-wingish interventionism. And they pushed out the more religious conservatives who wanted to bring about a shift in the religious attitudes of those people by bringing in Christianity to replace Islamist ideology. And we started making compromises that we never should have made in the first place. And the Obama administration exacerbated those problems because then he was like, oh, well, if we let these groups live as they are, they'll moderate on their own. But that's not the case. We've seen that, and that's why any neoconservative policy, which I'm advocating for, has to be about supporting indigenous Christians and Christians across the globe, particularly the Assyrian community in Iraq, the Maronite Christians in Lebanon, the Druze in Syria, and also in other places, because it's up to us to not just say we're not simply going to replace the bad guys, and it's up to us also to shift the culture towards the West by bringing in Christianity to replace Islamist ideology.
I mean, the thing about, with religion is it's not a couple of years.
Because Christianity has been shown to bring about all these values that we want. The Islamic world and the Western world are different for one very big reason, that the Islamic world has gone back in time rather than moderate, except in certain places. Like Saudi Arabia is going forward very much because it is very influenced by the West, which is a good model for a good model, but it still has some ways to go. But what we needed to do, though, in places like Afghanistan or in Iraq, was bring about a religious evangelistic spirit of Christianity into those regions to truly shift those places towards the Western direction. Because if we had done that, and we should have, we would have seen a much better result. And in particular, in the reality is that in Afghanistan, you not just needed to bring in that element. We should have restored the monarchy. That should have been something we should have done. We should have restored the king, letting in those ridiculous Karzai guys and all those people who took our money and robbed their own people of the benefits. Was absolutely stupid. The people didn't, again,
this is the problem with compromises, because the king should have been restored to Afghanistan, the monarch, and that didn't happen because, oh well, he in World War II he thought about joining the Axis because he and as a result we should not restore him to the throne because of the implications of that. My argument would have been, I don't care about people's preconceived notions or whatever. King would have brought a unity that would have helped bring about a better result for Afghanistan, and as a result, we should have restored the monarchy. But that's all should have, could have, would have stuff, alternate history stuff.
I mean, even still, if we did reinstate, like, say, a king, who's to say that a couple years down the road he wouldn't become like corrupted, and then all of a sudden we have to go in and just take him out and replace him again? With like hypocrites saying, "Oh, the monarchy is great for your country," and then all of a sudden the guy starts doing a bunch of bad things, and it's like, "Oh well, we got to take him out now." But if you did want to flip Afghanistan's religion and convert it from Islamism to Christianity, you would have had to start doing it like almost immediately after we invaded, because it takes not a couple years, it takes decades to flip a country's complete religion, especially when it comes to Islamism. Considering, Christianity and Islamism clash as simply based on the fact that the messiahs are different. For Islam, it's Muhammad, and for Christianity, it's Jesus Christ. For them, that's the basis of it. And if you want to flip a whole country's thought process on religion, it would take decades to do it. And if we would have started immediately when we invaded there, it might have gotten to the point where, maybe we would have stayed a little bit longer. But I wasn't able to debate your point regarding Russia invading Ukraine. That simply happened because they looked at the president of the United States and thought, wow, that guy's weak. Vladimir Putin wouldn't have done that if Donald Trump was in office right now. He respected Donald Trump, and Donald Trump respected him. And, that was the problem the media had. Like, oh, Donald Trump loves dictators. No, if you're going to get along with some guy who has 4,000 nukes, it's better to get along with the guy than be sworn enemies with the man. I mean, holy cow, crazy thought process. But, that happened because Joe Biden's a weak person. He's not entirely there. He's got dementia. He needs to go. And, Israel versus Gaza happened because of ideology clashing. And, oh my God, the Middle East is unstable for the 3,000th year in a row, and it's our problem again because of X. It's bound to keep happening in the Middle East. There's certain places that it just won't ever be stable because of what they believe. And, Jerusalem's a great place because it's the starting point of 3 different religions that have 3 different lines of thinking. And, you'll never be able to satisfy everybody. There will always be someone who has a problem. They will react on what they think is right, which is more than likely, in this case, invasion, which they did. And now the IDF and the Palestinian forces, they're fighting, and you're not going to be able to solve it. But I'm going to go to the bathroom and grab my clothes. I'll be back in 5 minutes, but I'll be able to hear y'all. So,
well, we have a lot more results in now. We've got 57% of the vote in, and none of these candidates is winning 60 to 33%.
That's not true, but I hate this result.
Yeah, this is going to be really embarrassing for her.
Well, this is a good thing. This is a good reason why I didn't predict this one, because
What?
I would have been I
Wait.
would have been 0 for 3.
They just called it for Haley,
Called what for Haley?
the
The what?
race, but how does that make any sense? Oh wait, no, they just changed it. None of these candidates won. Well, there you have it. There's the race. That was really weird for a second.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I was about to freak out for a minute. Man, she's just got to be devastated.
I need to go drink. I need to go drink my sorrows. Anybody got a beer?
Oh, you're leaving?
No, I'm not leaving. I'm just making a joke.
Oh,
Because
yeah,
I told you last time when I was at my favorite sushi place over in Tempe, watching the Iowa results, and it was kind of like I wanted to drink, but I couldn't because I had to drive home. But
you
like
should be
now I'm
excited
home,
about
so I
this.
might just drink. Now I'm home, so I might just drink.
You should want
'Cause
Trump back.
Here's the thing. I don't know if I look, look, Biden versus Trump. I obviously, would prefer, Trump because I know what Biden represents, and he represents the like totally terrible progressive values. I call them regressive. I essentially call them regressive progressives. But again, Trump concerns me because he has a lot of stuff that has essentially embraced from people that I just don't agree with, and isolationism aside, again, I don't know if a guy being indicted is gonna win against against an incumbent, but I mean, the crazier things have happened, so.
Well, I mean, those indictments are
I am
political.
back.
Dad, as you left, they called the race for none of these candidates.
Wow.
No way. That's awesome. I love this.
Whammo.
Whammo.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah,
Oh, Lord.
Right. Well, everyone throw tomatoes and such at me. I'm the loser here again.
All right, well,
Hey, you're welcome to your opinion.
what, Dad?
He's welcome to his opinion, you know.
I can't
I'm sorry
understand
you're-
what you're saying. Speak more
Said he's welcome
clearly.
to his opinion.
He said that I'm entitled to my opinion.
All right, well, I guess since the race is called, I wanted to get into the whole Israel conflict.
I stand with Israel.
Well, go fight if you stand with him.
Oh, I will.
I mean, my thing about Israel is that, you know, it was bound to happen, okay? It's a clash of ideologies. And the fact of the matter is, you'll never be able to make Israel just completely war free. Ever since they've been installed as a state, everyone's had problems with them. Like, it's a never ending problem that's happened ever since the end of World War II. And the fact of the matter is, there'll never be a safe state that doesn't know war. It's the truth because of the fact that people have different religious views that live around Israel. They don't believe what they believe, so they go and fight them. That's exactly what happened this time. It'll unfortunately happen again. You know, the IDF has pushed every one of the people that have, Palestine out of Israel, but now they're in Gaza, and now everyone's having a problem with it. Like, hey, if the IDF can hold their own and push them out and just get them out completely, let them do their thing. Like, we should not have to intervene. If they can hold their own, let them do it, you know?
Well, my opinion on this is on Israel relations and the war is that, look, I wish Israel needs to support America a lot more on the international stage. I think that Israel far too often is concerned with its regional issues, which are important, yes, but it needs to contribute more on an international sphere. You know, I don't like. There are a lot of people who say that Israel's our greatest ally. I would not say that. I would say that Korea is probably our greatest ally because Korea consistently fights with us in every conflict everywhere we go. Israel has not done so, but Israel is an important aspect in the global war on Islamist terrorism, and their war against Hamas is completely justified, and the reality is that they need to win. And the fact of the matter is that there has been far too much concessions made to PLO and Palestinian groups. The fact of the matter is that there needs to be no more concessions, no more talks. It's got to be victory, and that's it. Because the reality is that if Israel wants to have peace, it needs to stop playing with this idea that the Palestinian groups are actually negotiating or in good faith. The Palestinian groups will not stop until Israel is wiped off the face of the earth. And Israel does not want to be faced in a situation that the Eastern Roman Empire was faced with when facing the Ottoman Empire and other groups, because Israel is essentially an extension of Western civilization, and at the farthest gates, similar to the Eastern Roman Empire, and at the during the 1400s when it was literally on its deathbed and on life support. Israel is now in a position where, just like the Eastern Roman Empire, it can decide whether it's going to smash its opponents, go for full-blown victory, and stake its claim, or it can go status quo, which it has done recently, and continue to fight a war. One day it will actually potentially lose. And I know which direction I want. I want it to win.
Well, my whole thing is like people like Nikki Haley keep repeating the point that Israel's our greatest ally and America needs Israel. No, America doesn't need Israel. Israel needs America. Stop making us sound weak. And what do we get out of Israel ever? Like, I've been hearing this argument for like my whole life that Israel is so sacred and the U.S. needs Israel and they're our greatest ally. What do we get out of them? Like, just like, I'm not even just talking about like financially, like literally anything. What do we get out of them? Nothing. They're supposed to be our greatest intelligence source in the Middle East. The only intelligence they gather is the attacks that are coming against them. And they're constantly trying to get us to fight their wars. They're always constantly provoking people and then wanting us to step in on their behalf. I think that's disgusting. If you want to go around starting wars left and right, you can fight them. Like, they're constantly trying to provoke a war with Iran because they think that we're going to step in and fight it for them. No, we are not going to fight Iran for you. Iran is 4 times the size of Iraq. That would be a complete disaster if we got roped into that. And everybody's so worried about this Israel-Palestine thing. And yeah, Hamas is disgusting and they should be wiped off the face of the earth. But do we really need to commit genocide and wipe out the entire country of fucking Palestine? No, because not all of Palestinians are part of Hamas.
Okay, I gotta come in there. I gotta come in there. Okay, Palestinians celebrated 9/11. Okay, this isn't a conspiracy theory like the so-called dancing Israelis things, which is just nonsense. The Palestinians actually supported and celebrated 9/11. This was a great victory for them because it was part of their existential war against Israel. So to them, seeing thousands of Americans die in 9/11, or the many in New York or in the planes or whatever in the towers, was jubilation to them because it was part of their greater war against Israel. I have no sympathy with the Palestinians when they hate America. They want to see us fall. They hate our values, and if I were to walk in their streets, they would have no problem, beheading me publicly. I mean, this is a nation in which anti-Semitism and anti-Americanism is a way of life. I have no sympathy with them whatsoever. These claims of genocide are absolute nonsense, and they're deflections from what Hamas and what the Palestinians really want, which is to wipe. I'm not just talking about the state of Israel. The idea that they want to wipe Jews from the face of the earth. This is a fact of Palestinians. Their mindset. I have no sympathy with them whatsoever. They all are part of the problem because they create a system of this. And I don't. And so Israel is an ally. They're not our greatest ally, but they are an ally, and they are a fighter in when it comes to Islamist terrorism. All the Islamist terrorists that are fighting Israel, that are opposed to the West and America, Israel is fighting, and they're killing them for us. So that is a good benefit because they're killing terrorists that otherwise would be doing damage to us. Just like how the Eastern Roman Empire and in the medieval ages was a barrier between the Ottomans and other Eastern Islamic caliphates, who wanted to come into the West, and conquer the West. Constantinople stood as a barrier between them and the Western heartland. And when they collapsed, that ideology of Islamism came into Europe directly, not simply into the Balkans, but even into potentially into Europe proper. They tried to conquer. They had further aspirations, and these Hamas terrorists, what if they were to succeed and destroy Israel, just like these PLO guys? It would not stop there. They would have further goals on America and on the West because Islamism as an ideology, one wants to destroy the Jews. They want to kill the Jews. They want to destroy Jews because they are considered the greatest enemy threat to them. After that, they're coming for the West. They're coming for our way of life and our values because to them, we are kafirs. We are an anathema. We are the people that have to be subjugated and brought to Islam either by subjugation and force or through death. I've got no sympathy for the Palestinians. I got no sympathy for the PLO people. They brought this on themselves. So I'm not going to blame Israel for the stuff that's happening. That they brought that on themselves because they wanted it and they deserve it.
Yeah, but if Israel wants to constantly provoke other countries and think that we're going to jump in on their behalf, that's got to stop. We're not going to go fight their wars for them. If Netanyahu wants to start wars everywhere under the sun, he can deal with it. His military can deal with it.
Like, but where are they doing that? They're not. Like Israel, like what I just said about like the Islamist ideology, which is first destroy the Jews, then destroy the West. That's the same thing with Iran. Israel is not out to get. Israel is not trying to provoke a war with Iran. It's trying to defend itself from Iran, and it wants to. It knows that there might be a potential. It knows it's fighting already a war already. It's fighting a proxy war. Iranian government is essentially funding Hezbollah and all these other groups that are fighting Israel because they want to destroy Israel by extent because they don't have a land border with each other. The fact of the matter is that if I know that America could win a war against Iran and should restore the Shah. Now that's something to be foreseen in the future, but the reality is that it's the Israelis are an ally in our fight. They're not our greatest ally, but they are a contribution. And I don't believe this nonsense that we're fighting wars for Israel. Like what war did we fight in Iraq for Israel? That wasn't for Israel. That was for us. Same thing with Afghanistan. That wasn't there for them. It was for us. And the same Israelis have their own regional foreign policy. So does and America has its own international foreign policy. It's just like how just like how again we have our differences, they have our we should not then say, well, let's leave Israel to the wolves. No. Israel is just like Constantinople was in the medieval ages. It is an ally and a barrier, more importantly, to all the Islamist crazies who, if they were not fighting Israel, they would be fighting us. Because once Israel goes, once the Jews are defeated in their minds, the West is next. And I have no intention to let that happen.
Well, Dad, what's your take?
I mean, it was like I was saying earlier, the fact that Israel exists just means there's going to be constant conflict in that area. And I think it's interesting the fact that you say if we go to war with Iran that we would win. I mean, that's not necessarily so because we would be fighting them on their land. I mean, yes, we do have a more advanced Navy. We do have a more advanced Air Force. But still, at the end of the day, when you invade someone else's country and they're close to how advanced your military is, there's going to be a lot of casualties. And, you know, Iran's, their whole country's belief is that, you know, the West is evil, destroy them, the Jews, they deserve to die, all that, right? So if we were to just mass invade them from around, we would be taking a lot of casualties, and for what exact gain to protect ourselves? I mean, who's to say the terrorists aren't already in our country because our border is so open? And the FBI has admitted that there's roughly 10,000 people, and there's probably even more that are associated with known terrorist groups like the Taliban, Hezbollah, you know. And I mean, the FBI is not doing anything about it. So if we were to go to war with Iran and, say there were some terrorist backed cells that are already in country in the US, who's to say that those terrorist cells wouldn't, attack our citizens, kill our citizens, start beheading people in the streets? I mean, if we did invade Iran, it would be a colossal mess. I mean, we might eventually win, but at what cost? 500,000 lives?
No, Iran is not a different this crazy animal. For example, in Iran, there's actually a very sizable pro-Western contingent. There's also a lot of Islamist fanatics, but Islam in Iran is not the indigenous religion to that area. The Zoroastrianism actually is. And there are a lot of people in Iran who actually want the Shah back. And there's actually a sizable contingent in not just the Iranian diaspora or the Persian diaspora, but also Persians internationally that really just want to see the regime go. This is different from other places in which the anti-Americanism is just ingrained. The Ayatollahs have tried to ingrain anti-Americanism into the culture, but there's still a big number, a sizable number of Iranians that have not bought into the nonsense and want to see the Shah restored because they look back and say, we want the monarchy, we don't want this Islamist ideology. And there's a lot more of that. But going back though to Israel with that situation, there's going to be conflict because you have Islamist fanatics, but just because that there's not conflict with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is a Muslim majority country, but it has I would say, even though the relations are not official, they're certainly cordial and under the table, and they exist. The same thing with Jordan. Jordan also has, does not want to see Hamas succeed because they understand the threat that the Palestinian groups face because the Palestinian groups tried to take over Jordan at one point. Lebanon, which is under siege, which used to be a majority Christian Maronite country, is now dominated more by Muslims, but who are essentially invaders into that country who took it over by hostile means. And there's a sizable number of Maronite Christians who would love nothing more than to see the Islamists purged and rejected and thrown out of the country and to reestablish a Christian Maronite state in Lebanon. And same thing with the Egyptians too. The Egyptian government is much more like, look, we deal with those Hamas people because we don't want them in the Sinai because we've already got terrorists we're dealing with over there. The reality is that Israel, the fact of the matter is that a lot of the Arab Muslim leaders, might publicly say things about the Palestinians in order to cater to a certain electorate. But privately, they tell the Israelis, please kill these guys, get rid of them, and do it quickly because we want this problem to be resolved. The fact of the matter is that the people in Gaza brought this on themselves. I don't care what happens. They deserve what's happening because if they're going to celebrate Americans' deaths on 9/11, which they did, and if they're going to celebrate the massacre of Americans and push for the slaughter of Jews in the world, by all means, you bring upon your own suffering. You brought it on yourself, and that's your fault. For electing a terrorist group to run your affairs. You get what's coming to you.
Well, I mean, if we dealt with every country that supported the death of, they're celebrating the death of Americans on 9/11, or X amount of Americans were killed in a shooting, and then some other country celebrates that. If we live by the doctrine of, if you celebrate us getting killed, well, we're going to invade you and destroy your country. We would be at war until the end of time. We would have already invaded Iran. We would have invaded pretty much the entirety of the Middle East based on that factor alone. So, I mean, the fact of, oh, they supported the death of Americans, well,
Based.
they deserve to die.
Yeah, exactly. Because if the idea, for example, I remember, looking back, because like looking through the records, the Russians when 9/11 happened actually left flowers at our American embassy, which was a sign of the Russians expressing their sympathy with our tragedy because they had dealt with Islamist terrorists from the Chechens and stuff like that in the 90s. And yeah, I mean, no offense, if you celebrate the death of Americans and you think that it's okay for us, to get murdered and slaughtered, well, I've got no problem. I've got no problem showing you what American power means. The reality. I don't care. And like you say, oh well, we would be fighting more people. Well, we were more people, and we killed them, and that was a good thing. America was stronger as a result. I have no sympathy with people who think that who want to see America burn. Okay, the Islamists who want to see America burn and have had and who hoped that what Al Qaeda did on 9/11 would be the beginning of a series of even more terrible and escalatory attacks upon America through different groups that thankfully did not materialize because of our the Patriot Act and the efforts by the Bush administration to never let another 9/11 happen again, and some of those policies then being carried on later to keep fighting the terrorists over in the Middle East and not let them come here to America through drone warfare. I don't care if a bunch of Al-Shabaab militants and their families die, because if those people are okay with beheading me and my next door neighbor, and by all means, I don't care if a drone rips them to shreds. Why should I have any sympathy for them whatsoever? There were a lot of people, in the past, in the 2010s, who said, "Oh, the poor drone strikes. Look what happened." I'm like, I don't care. Those people would have, in this reverse circumstances, not only would have stuck a drone and bombed, the federal court building or your government office, they would have also come to your home and beheaded your wife right in front of you and thought it was justified. I don't give a crap. They get what's coming to them, all of them.
I mean,
you might call me an extremist, but you might call me an extremist, but I don't care.
If you feel this way, then I'll tell you this: why don't you join either the military for the U.S. or a PMC group, and then you can go dish out your justice as you see fit. You'll be able to. Don't worry about it. But I mean, it was like I was saying, like if we lived by that mindset, we would be at war until there was nothing left. And the fact of the matter is, the current president of the United States is a weak human being and a complete moron. Putting it nicely, I have a lot worse things I could say about him.
I agree with you that President Joe Biden is a weakling. I agree with you that President Joe Biden is a moron. I agree with you that President Joe Biden is a disaster for America. But the problem is that your proposed solution is not a solution. It's just a rehashed version of what he is doing. It's in a different form. It's not the solution. And that's the problem, is that you're advocating for a form of isolationism that is just like that is similar to his, with only some different dressing.
Temporary pause of our foreign relations until we can fix ourselves here. Once we fix ourselves here with the border situation and getting rid of every single terrorist that's in the country, then if we want to worry about foreign policy and interject our hand wherever, whatever. But, if they keep crawling back to us begging for money, it comes to a point of like, okay, why am I giving you this money to go fight when you're not fighting? Because you're not fighting, you're stealing the money we're giving you to fight, and then you keep crawling back to us and stealing our money. That's when it becomes a problem of, well, why should I keep giving you money because you're clearly not doing anything, you're losing, and most of the money we send to Ukraine, that goes to people's pensions, so people don't have to fight, and it went to rebuilding Kiev, and the only reason that Russia invaded them was because Ukraine wanted to join NATO, and then Zelensky kept, playing with Putin's emotions, like, "Hey, I'm going to join NATO. Guess what? What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do?" And then guess what happens? Russia invades, and then all of a sudden, oh my God, the world's on fire and just going crazy over it. Well, it never would have happened if Zelensky would have stopped messing with Putin, and that was the whole reason he didn't want Ukraine to join NATO, was because NATO was going to be right up on his border. And, that's fine. And if you look at what Ukraine's actual political beliefs are and what's tattooed on their soldiers, you'll realize that they're not actually a democracy or a republic at all. It's more likely an authoritarian government. And Zelensky is threatening to suspend elections until the war's over with and all that. It's crazy. I mean, we're pretty much supporting authoritarianism by supporting Ukraine still.
Okay, so let me dissect that. Ukraine is fighting a war against our enemies, the Kremlin, and for good reason. Okay, this idea that, oh, well, if Ukraine hadn't thought of joining NATO, that would have stopped the war. No, Ukraine wasn't even planning on joining NATO. Ukraine had the idea that, look, it didn't want to antagonize the Kremlin, so it's not going to join NATO because it doesn't want to escalate things, okay? Afghanistan, the loss there for America is what gave Putin the idea that he could invade Ukraine proper and take it, and there would be not an American response, and he nearly did. Money that we spend in Ukraine on their military and on rebuilding their nation, just like in Kiev, because again, if your capital gets bombed and the Russians try to take it, and the Kremlin try to take it, and yeah, you need to rebuild it because you have people who live there. You have people, you want to have infrastructure. You want to have sewers working. You want to have the water functioning so people can have baths, people can drink, brush their teeth. You want to have the roads working so you can get things back to normal. You can't just win the war and then say,
when
"Oh
Berlin
well,
got
go ahead."
destroyed, it wasn't rebuilt for another 5 years. After World War II ended, when Germany surrendered, Berlin wasn't rebuilt to an actual adequate state for 5 years at least on the western side. The Eastern Bloc was a different story. I mean, yeah, I get it. That was 70 plus years ago.
Yeah, but we rebuilt Berlin and we rebuilt Germany. We had the Marshall Plan, for example, where we literally everything we had practically bombed, we rebuilt from the ground up because we were trying to ensure that Soviets with communism would not come and take the place, and that worked. And it's the same thing with Ukraine. And look, I don't care if communist parties get banned. Okay, if a communist party gets banned, then that's a good thing. If the communism is not an ideology that should ever be propagated, it should be banned. And so if Zelensky bans a communist party for supporting the Kremlin, I don't care. Just like in America, we should ban the communist parties here. There are communist parties on the ballot here in America, and yeah, they have no real political power, so they're no real threat, but they certainly do have influence in the democratic establishment. And the idea is that this problem is that we have real stated goals that have to be dealt with. Okay, yeah, I don't want America to have to be able to fund other nations' defense, but when it involves our national security and our national prestige and pride, then guess what we have to? Look, you can, again, the argument you make earlier is, well, deal with the stuff here, then we could deal with over here. But again, I'm not a believer that you can only do one thing at a time. Again, you can chew gum and walk at the same time, like John Bolton is famous for saying. You can deal with the border by building a wall and by deporting a large number of illegal immigrants and reforming the immigration system so we actually streamline it and make it better. And you can also make sure that the Kremlin doesn't succeed in Ukraine, or that Hamas doesn't succeed in Palestine, Israel. I'm not. The problem here is that we come to this issue of, again, where you can only do one thing or the other. You can do multiple things at once, and the sooner that Israel wins and destroys Hamas, and the sooner that Ukraine wins and defeats the Kremlin, the sooner we can take all that money that we would have been pouring into those nations and bring it back here so we can deal with our own internal affairs. Like, I
Yeah, but
agree with you. You and I agree on the immigration issue a lot. I want to build the wall myself. I wish that we should have done it and we need to do it. But
I'll go down there and build it with my own two hands.
Yes, sir. I'd help too.
well, I'm not an engineer, so I don't have that skill. But even I want it. I still want it built.
I mean, it's
Like
you have
I
good
just
points,
like
Neil. I'm not saying that you're completely wrong on everything. Like I agree with some of the things you say, but it's like if America's always policing the world and what they should do, meanwhile we can't police ourselves. Like I just want to take 1 year or a year and a half, 2 years tops of just us, America, 100% focusing on, hey, we're going to secure the border. We're going to screen all these people, and whoever's crossed that border and has gotten asylum through the Biden administration should be immediately deported if they have signs to terrorism, signs to any violent crime. Like, I mean, let's be honest, any crime that's worthy of a felony, or you know, any of horrendous actions against humanity, those people should be immediately deported, and if they ever show up at the border again, should be instantaneously detained. And if they get caught 2 or 3 times, say, you know what? Well, since you keep trying to get in here and commit your heinous acts, well, sorry, you're gonna get the death penalty. But if we would just take that 2 years to focus on our border and secure it to the point where we can actually have a good system of seeing, hey, this family of three is, they're satisfactory candidates to become U.S. citizens. They're like, all right, you can come in here, and then after that, we can see how exactly the world can handle without America intervening and putting our hand in the pot, because I feel like the world is feeding out of America's hand because, yeah, I get it. We're a superpower. We're pretty much the most powerful person in NATO. But if we were to just, take 2 years to fix our country, how would the world be if we weren't there just, feeding out of their hand? It might be a wake up call for them to actually do something of their own and fix themselves and not rely on America's money to help fix them. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that we shouldn't give money to foreign people or, people in NATO. We shouldn't support them. But there's a point where it becomes an endless pit of us just giving them money and then we just get the same result of, hey, I need some more. Like, I'm not saying that we should stop, but I want to see the world change so they can help themselves more than relying on other people to help their problems, per se.
Well, I agree with you to a point. Like, again, we did that with Korea. Korea now sustains itself. So yes, it has an American presence, but they fund their own military, they fund their own defense. We're more of just a presence. We don't subsidize the Korean state, and we don't subsidize the Korean military. We, just like in Japan, we don't subsidize the Japanese defense force. We don't subsidize the Japanese state. I agree with you that eventually, there has to be a point where they take the reins. But in order to do that, you've got to make sure that you get to that point, and you've got to get successfully there. And what I agree. So I agree with you. That is the ultimate goal, and that was what we should push for. I think the problem, unfortunately, is that we've lost sight of that because, again, I think the government has expanded far too much as a bureaucratic state that thinks that it can write checks everywhere and that's going to solve the problem. And unfortunately, that isn't the case. I mean, unfortunately, some of the money, and I think we could agree with this, is in Afghanistan, for example, was siphoned off at different points by all sorts of different people. And if it had been, this happened a lot during the Obama administration because they just thought they could write checks and just have a hands-off approach and things would work. That's not the case. And the reality is that even today we're seeing that where we think that we can always just write a check somewhere and that's going to solve the problems themselves. But I agree with you, money helps and it should be, and it's needed. But if you want to if we want to take that money so we can invest in our domestic issues, we have to solve the foreign issues because they don't go away. It's the same thing with the domestic issues; they don't go away. But I can understand your point. I at least say I may not agree with it fully, but at least I understand it.
I mean, if we play ball right, we're doing half people focused on domestic policy and half focused on foreign policy. That ends up we end up spending, like cutting the budget for one to help supply the other, and that leaves holes in. Say we're doing some domestic policy reforms, and we got to have say $20 billion, right? But something came up foreign, and now we got to take some of the money that was advocated for domestic policy, and we got to send it to the foreign policy bracket. So if we focus on two things at the same time, the problem with the average American senator and everybody that's in public office now is they want to like pitch the fit of, oh well, we can't do one without doing the other, and that's the main problem. Look at this the border bill reform that they just tried to pass and it failed because in order for everyone to sign it, they had to send 60 billion to Ukraine and like 10-15 million to Israel, and then they would get like 10 billion for the border. You shouldn't have to pair those two together. You should be able to come to a unanimous agreement that, hey, if we want to send some money overseas, we can, and we can also send some money to the border and get that under control. But the problem is that our government is so tied up in interjecting their hand overseas and not caring about the average U.S. citizen that it's almost irrelevant that what they do overseas helps us here. It's come to a point where everything they do overseas arguably hurts us more than it helps us. I mean, it's happening right now. You look at the migrants getting sent to sanctuary cities, they're causing a lot of crime, they're causing a lot of problems, and what happens to the American citizen? Nothing. You can't help yourself, and God forbid if you live in New York City and you shoot someone in self-defense, you're going to prison. Is it right? No. If you're defending yourself, you should not even be on trial. But in the state of New York, if you shoot someone in self-defense, that's the crime, and you still go to prison. And that's the same way it is in any democratic state. But hey, if you want to fix this problem of foreign policy and domestic policy and be able to deal with it at the same time, you need to reform arguably the entire system because it is flawed severely here.
Well, again, you say, oh, well, we got to focus only on domestic because if we're taking resources to foreign and domestic, that means we can't do domestic. But no, I would argue it's not where we spend the money, okay, foreign policy versus domestic. It's how we spend it also, okay? So in foreign policy, for example, we give to like millions of dollars to Pakistan in aid, okay? And there is no reason for us to give even a penny Pakistanis, especially after how they helped keep the Taliban alive. The Taliban would not have won. It would not exist had it not been for the Pakistani state subsidizing them, training them, and offering them sanctuary. Okay, just very similar to how rogue elements in Ireland supported and aided and abetted the IRA. But unlike in Ireland, where it was not government policy to support the IRA, in Pakistan, it was actual government policy to support, train, fund, and subsidize the Taliban. Okay, and so, for example, if we had said, and this was something the Trump administration actually did that I agreed with, which was where we say to the Pakistanis, look, we're going to cut aid here and there if you don't get your issues with the Taliban under control. But I would have gone a step further, which is what I've said, look, we're cutting aid to Pakistan, you're not getting a single penny from us, and we're going to take that money and use it to help build the wall. Because because if we understood on foreign policy, for example, who our friends are and who our enemies are, then we would then take the money that we would be using to help fund or subsidize them and instead use it to support us. So I'm in agreement that money can be spent better. But I'm not in agreement that we have to necessarily retreat from the world. What we have to do is use our money to our advantage, where instead nations who are hostile to us, like Pakistan, we stop giving them money thinking that they're going to be friendly to us, which they're not. And instead, you spend that money on our own internal affairs. So that would be my solution right there, which is to say, okay, in order to get more funds for more domestic issues, stop subsidizing people and governments and nations or whatever organizations are in those nations, thinking that if we give them money, they'll be more friendly to us, when in reality, they're taking our money and spitting in our face. Pakistan being the biggest one.
Oh yeah, I completely agree with that. Like, if we're giving Pakistan money for whatever reason, the government's, but we still clash ideologies. Like, why would we give them money? Because Pakistan hates us. They've never liked us, but we'll give them money. Yeah, no. Like, if I was the president, I would cut that to me and be like, well, you don't want to get along. That's fine. Guess what? I'm gonna stop sending you money. You're gonna figure it out, and I don't care. So I would. You're right. I would take that money that we were sending to countries that hate us, and I would start spending it domestically. Say for example, reform the roadways, because I don't know what state you live in, but the state of Wisconsin, the roadways here, they're terrible. I mean, you might have traffic cones up year round, but what gets done? Arguably a third of the work that's supposed to get completed with the allotted amount of time. But you know, besides that, I would also send that money and start putting it in the homelessness programs. We should arguably solve the homelessness problem. We should solve the homeless vet problem, which should never happen. Keep in mind, if you serve your country and you end up homeless, that should never in this world happen. You signed a contract saying, I'm going to uphold the Constitution, I'm going to defend America in all its ways. If you end up homeless, that is a failure on the government to help you. And I'm not saying that all homeless vets, some of them have some very serious problems. They got some severe PTSD. Some of them don't think they need help for it. And that's an unfortunate byproduct of, them going overseas and fighting and ground-to-ground combat. And, the Taliban and people in Afghanistan, they use some dirty tactics. They would use children and strap them with suicide vests. And, that messes some people up really deeply. But if we were able to actually reform the mental health system in this country, able to, give the VA adequate funding so they could help everybody, that would go leaps and bounds to solve a lot of problems in this country. Not just the border. The border, it's a problem, but the massive problem with America is mental health and homelessness and veteran homelessness especially. I am in the belief, if you're a veteran, you should never end up homeless. Never.
Well, it's a tragedy that any veteran should ever be homeless, and that's just utterly disgusting and something that should uh, absolutely never happen. I know for a fact though that, again, like for example, we currently just could fix our roads, and we should fix our roads, and the reality is that we should be using money that we give to nations who hate us to do that. So hopefully this is an area that we can both agree on. So going to that argument that we should not fund or subsidize states that hate us, I would take the disbursements that we've given, for example, to Palestine, which have been in excess of $107 million in 2024, and instead put that money to, your state of Wisconsin and fund building the roads. I would take the 178 million that we give to Vietnam in disbursements that we gave in 2024, which again has never renounced communism, which was which in the Vietnam War killed U.S. troops and is still a communist state technically. I would say that they have no entitlement to any of our money, and we can instead use that to build the roads in Alaska, where it's a travesty that much of the rural parts of the state
aren't connected by roads whatsoever. You have to get there by air. And the 237 million that we gave into Pakistan in 2024, and we have weird, I don't know why we have even obligations to them. There's like $133 million that we obligate to them in spending, and yet we gave them like $237 million, which is ridiculous in disbursements. That money should be used for America. And so this is something about my neoconservative policy, which is to say, take the money that we're spending for nations who hate us and instead take that money and spend it here for America. So I think that's something maybe we can agree on, and something that would be a joint proposal, because I do agree that we shouldn't subsidize people who hate us. We should instead subsidize. We should fund the building of what you just mentioned, which was our infrastructure. So that would be a neoconservative policy of mine, which is to take money earmarked for Pakistan, Vietnam, and Palestine, and then say, well, screw that. We're taking those checks back and we're spending it on our own people. You guys can go F yourselves.
I mean, I'm in total agreement with that. I mean, you can't buy friends at the end of the day. You really can't buy friends if you're an average person, you know? If it's, you know, Joe Biden writing a check to Pakistan saying, hey, please be my friend. Here's $100 million, you know? He might be like, oh, thanks for the money, but I still hate you, you know, and I hate your ideologies. Like, you'd be like, well, you know what? Then fine. You're not going to get any of my money. And I do agree that we should take the money that we're wasting essentially on people who despise us, and even if we kept sending them money, still hate us. I mean, you can hate us for free. I don't care. If you hate us, you hate us. Whatever. Give me that money back, and I'll just reinvest it in the country ourselves. Build roadways, build drug rehab facilities. You know, the whole nine. We arguably the whole entirety of America needs a overhaul of the healthcare system. For example, you know, you just go to the ER. If you don't have insurance, you're going to get charged roughly $5,000 just to go to the ER and get seen by a doctor, and it couldn't be a life-threatening thing. But you know, if you have insurance, you know, they'll get into a piss and match with the actual hospital, and there'll be a back and forth thing. But that's the thing. At the end of the day, healthcare shouldn't come down to insurance agency versus the actual health association. It should be patient with doctor, and that should be where it ends. It should only be you and your doctor discussing what's wrong with you, how to fix you, and then the insurance company should be like, hey, you know what, whatever, we'll cover it. So I mean, at the end of the day, obesity is a problem. We covered this probably a couple of hours ago now. We've been going at it for a while, but you know, if obesity wasn't such a problem with America, you know, people's life expectancy would go up, because you know, obesity is linked to a lot of things like heart failure, you know, clogged organs because of all the fat buildup from all the eating. And the problem is no one wants to change these things. But
Well,
we need to.
I'm glad that we're at least ending on a if you will, bipartisan agreement that, you know, we can take all that money that we earmark and disperse to Pakistan, Palestine, Vietnam, and we even sent 8 million to China, which is like ridiculous. We could take all that money instead, you know, put that to healthcare, put that to our roads, and I mean, I'll add that it's a tragedy that, and to our veterans too. You know, that especially to our veterans. But you know, I'll just say this. You know, there's no reason for us to subsidize Pakistan. There's no reason for us to subsidize Vietnam. There's no reason for us to subsidize China or any nation that has a stated policy or actions against us. And we should take that money, and that'd be a neoconservative policy. Spend it here. So I'm glad we can at least end on a bipartisan note.
I mean, that's the thing. It was like I was saying, if you hate us, you can hate us for free. Shouldn't have to pay you. But like, there needs to be so many overhauls done here that, like, if we would take our foreign policy money that we spend billions on and just did it, we took that money for 1 year. I'm not saying it's going to be a long time, just 1 year. We have allies everywhere. They can keep it fixed. Arguably everything wrong, and then we could come out stronger than ever. You know, we could start our recruitment drive up again. We could start the programs to fix, you know, American obesity, we could, start taking that number down, percent like 1% to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, to end up getting to the point where America's a healthy country, and life expectancy starts going up for a change instead of going down. Excuse me, sorry. But after that, once we get to the point where America's self-sustainable, we can start providing jobs here. People aren't dying because they're overweight and fat, have clogged blood vessels, and having strokes and heart attacks and all that. If we could get to the point where America could actually be a number one situation in the world because the people that actually live there are number one in the world for like life expectancy, quality of life, all that. And I could see us sending money overseas, but until we get to that point, I don't think we should be playing our hand into that.
Well, I'll disagree on that. But I think we can at least agree on this, is that we shouldn't pay people to try to be our friends. Pakistan, Cuba, China, Vietnam, nations that, have either a stated policy against us or or are just completely opposed to us should not get a penny. And we should direct it here. I still believe you can chew gum and walk at the same time, but at least you and I can agree. And I'm gonna go on this point, but at least you and I agree that you can't buy your friends. Have a good night, everyone.
Will we see you on Thursday for the caucus? Is he already gone?
Yeah, he's already gone.
All right. Well, thanks guys for coming. The stream was great. We had a lot of good commentary. We got the result we wanted. And we will be back again on Thursday, 2 days from now, to stream the caucus. Don't forget we have the Nevada caucus as well as the Virgin Island caucus. So we'll have 2 caucuses in one stream on one night. It's going to be great. I can't wait to see you all there. Psycho Dad, Caden, is there anything you guys want to say before we end the stream?
Subscribe to 28 if you're new.
Make sure to join us for that caucus, because I guarantee you Neocon will be back and we will be debating again. And as you can see, Neocon and myself had a lot to talk about, so if you're interested, make sure to tune into that especially.
All right, guys, so have a good night. Let's go and celebrate the